The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields compress spacetime according to predictable equations. Transporters convert matter to energy with mathematical precision. Even Q's seemingly chaotic interventions follow patterns the Federation has begun to recognize. But what happens when the timeline itself becomes a battlefield, when the past demands salvation and the future forbids interference? What happens when Captain Jean-Luc Picard must choose between watching Earth burn or erasing the very future he's sworn to protect? The Enterprise D hung in perfect stillness above a binary star system, her vast saucer section catching the amber light of twin suns. On the bridge, Captain Picard stood behind his command chair, hands clasped behind his back as he watched the viewscreen display stellar phenomena that hadn't been properly catalogued since the initial surveys of 2351. It was, by all accounts, a routine scientific mission, the kind that reminded Starfleet officers why they'd joined in the first place. "Captain," Data's voice carried its characteristic precision from the ops station. "I am detecting an unusual subspace distortion developing approximately 40,000 kilometers off our port bow. Configuration suggests a highly localized chronoton field with temporal variance readings of." The android paused, his golden eyes widening fractionally in what those who knew him recognized as surprise. "Captain, the temporal variance is increasing exponentially. We are reading timeline fluctuations spanning 400 years. Picard moved swiftly to Data's station, Riker materializing at his shoulder. The readouts painted an impossible picture, a swirling vortex of temporal energy tearing through normal spacetime like a wound in reality itself. "Shields up. Red alert." The klaxon's urgent pulse filled the bridge as the crew moved with practiced efficiency to battle stations. "Whatever that is, it's pulling us in," LaForge's voice came from engineering, strain evident. "I'm reading gravitational shear that's off the scale. Warp engines are offline, something's dampening the plasma flow." The Enterprise shuddered, a deep resonant groan echoing through her superstructure. Picard gripped his chair as the deck pitched 15 degrees. On the view screen, the binary stars stretched and distorted, smearing across space as if reality itself were melting. The chronoton vortex expanded, a maelstrom of blue-white energy that filled the screen. "All hands, brace for impact." Picard's voice cut through the chaos. The Enterprise D plunged into the vortex. Time became meaningless. Picard felt stretched across centuries, saw the launch of the Phoenix in 2063, witnessed his own childhood in La Barre, glimpsed futures that might never be. The bridge light strobed wildly, consoles sparking as chronometric radiation flooded the ship's systems. He heard Troy cry out, overwhelmed by temporal echoes of emotions from hundreds of potential timelines. Then, with a final violent lurch, the Enterprise burst back into normal space. The view screen stabilized, showing the black void of space and... "My God," Riker breathed. Earth filled the lower quarter of the screen. But this wasn't the Earth they knew. The continental outlines were familiar, but there were no orbital platforms, no lunar colonies with their distinctive biodomes, no traffic control satellites managing the steady stream of ships that should be flowing between the planet and Mars. This Earth was primitive, early warp era at best. Temporal displacement confirmed, Data reported, fingers flying across his console. "We have traveled backward in time approximately 374 years. Current date is July 2, 1996, Earth calendar." Picard felt ice form in his stomach. 1996, pre-first contact. Pre-warp. A protected period under the Temporal Prime Directive. "Captain," Worf's deep voice carried an edge of warning. "Sensors detect multiple massive objects entering Earth's atmosphere. Configuration unknown. Mass readings indicate structures 15 miles in diameter." The view screen shifted, magnifying the view of Earth's western hemisphere. Picard watched in mounting horror as enormous disc-shaped vessels, city-sized monstrosities of alien design, descended through the clouds, positioning themselves over major population centers. He could see one settling above what Data's readouts identified as New York City, another over Los Angeles, a third over Washington, D.C. Scanning the vessels, Data continued, his tone carrying none of the dread Picard felt spreading through his chest. Technology is significantly advanced compared to 1996 Earth capabilities but crude by Federation standards. However, energy readings suggest directed energy weapons of considerable destructive capacity. Captain, I am detecting massive energy buildups within each vessel's primary weapon system. Time to discharge. Picard heard himself ask, though he already knew the answer would be terrible. Approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds. 90 seconds before millions of people who had no idea what was happening, no shields, no defense grids, no way to fight back, would die. Picard thought of Earth's history files, searched his memory for any record of an alien attack in 1996. Nothing. Whatever was about to happen hadn't occurred in the timeline he knew. Unless they were meant to stop it. Unless their presence here was what created the timeline they knew. Or unless any action they took would erase that timeline entirely. Number 1, get me everything we can from their datanet, Picard ordered, his mind racing through temporal mechanics and prime directive protocols. I need to know what's happening down there. Data, full analysis of those vessels. LaForge, I need warp capability restored. We may need to leave orbit quickly. Captain, Troy's voice was tight with controlled emotion. I'm sensing death. Fear on a scale I've never experienced. There are 6 billion people on that planet and they're about to. The view screen flared white. When the image cleared, New York City was gone. Where the sprawling metropolis had stood moments before, there was now only a wall of flame and ash spreading outward in a perfect circle of annihilation. The directed energy beam had carved a 15-mile diameter crater into the Earth's surface, vaporizing everything within its radius instantly. Picard watched Los Angeles die the same way. Then Washington. Then Moscow, Beijing, London, Paris, city after city erased in pulses of alien fire that lit the planet's surface like matches struck in darkness. Casualty estimates, he forced himself to say. Data's response came with mechanical precision that somehow made it worse. Preliminary estimates indicate 36 million dead in the initial strikes. However, Captain, these appear to be only preliminary bombardments. The vessels are maintaining position over additional cities. Based on current deployment patterns, I calculate the alien force intends to systematically exterminate Earth's entire population within 72 hours. 72 hours. 3 days. The length of time it would take for 6 billion people to die. Picard turned away from the view screen, unable to watch another city burn. Around him, his crew sat frozen at their stations. Riker's jaw was clenched so tight Picard could see the muscle jumping. Worf's hands gripped his tactical console as if he wanted to tear it apart. Even Data seemed affected, his positronic brain processing the enormity of what they were witnessing. Captain, Riker's voice was low, dangerous. We have to do something. The Temporal Prime Directive, Picard began. To hell with the Temporal Prime Directive. Riker exploded from his chair, years of controlled discipline shattering. We're watching genocide, Captain. We have the power to stop this and we're just sitting here. If we intervene, we could erase our entire timeline. Picard shot back. Everything that led to the Federation, to first contact with the Vulcans, to every advance humanity has made in the last 4 centuries could be undone. We could doom billions more than we save. Or we could save them all, Riker countered. Sir, with all due respect, we don't know what happens if we do nothing. For all we know, this is the timeline. Maybe we're supposed to be here. Picard looked at his first officer, saw the same argument reflected in every face on the bridge. They were Starfleet officers, trained to explore strange new worlds and protect life in all its forms. And they were being asked to do nothing while an entire civilization died. Data, Picard said quietly. Scan the alien vessels. I want to know everything. Weapons capabilities, shield frequencies, power distribution, crew complement, hive structure, communication protocols. Everything. A flicker of something that might have been approval crossed Riker's face. And Mr. Worf, Picard continued, his voice hardening with decision. Take us to the far side of the moon. Full sensor stealth. If we're going to violate the Temporal Prime Directive, we're going to be very careful about how we do it. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The Enterprise DS impulse engines flared to life, carrying her away from Earth and toward the ancient lunar surface. Toward a position where they could watch, analyze, and perhaps, despite every regulation that governed time travel, find a way to save a world that didn't yet know the stars were full of friends as well as enemies. The moon's far side filled the view screen, a desolate landscape of ancient craters and Maria untouched by human exploration in this era. Here, shielded from Earth's primitive radar and radio telescopes, the Enterprise D settled into a holding pattern that kept her hidden from both the planet below and the alien fleet overhead. Picard stood in his ready room, staring at the wall-mounted monitor displaying Earth's night side. Fires marked where cities had been. The familiar glow of civilization had been replaced by scattered points of destruction. He'd watched the recordings 3 times now, watched those massive alien vessels unleash devastation with methodical efficiency, watched millions die in seconds. Each viewing made the weight in his chest heavier. The door chimed. Come. Guinan entered without preamble, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of Saurian brandy that Picard kept for moments when synthahol wouldn't suffice. She poured in silence, handed him a glass, and settled into the chair across from his desk. You're going to tell me I can't save them, Picard said quietly. I'm going to tell you that you're Jean-Luc Picard, Guinan replied. Which means you've already read every temporal mechanics regulation 3 times, consulted the Department of Temporal Investigation's protocols, and reviewed every historical record of timeline contamination we have on file. You know the arguments. You don't need me to repeat them. Picard took a long drink. The brandy burned. Then why are you here? Because knowing the regulations and living with the choice are different things. Guinan's dark eyes held infinite patience. I've lived through 600 years, Captain. I've seen civilizations rise and fall. I've watched friends die when I could have saved them. And I can tell you that some burdens don't get lighter with time, they just become part of who you are. A soft alert tone interrupted them. Bridge to Captain Picard. Picard tapped his comm badge. Go ahead, number 1. Sir, we've accessed Earth's global data network. You need to see this. Moments later, Picard stood on the bridge with his senior staff assembled. Data had compiled a comprehensive overview of Earth's situation, and what it revealed was simultaneously inspiring and heartbreaking. The alien vessels appeared without warning at 0600 hours Universal Time. Data began, his fingers dancing across the ops console to display intercepts of Earth's primitive television and radio broadcasts. Initial response from Earth's military forces proved completely ineffective. Nuclear weapons were deployed against the largest vessel, a mothership in stationary orbit, with no measurable effect. Their defensive shields appear to operate on a rotating modulation frequency that disperses kinetic and energy-based attacks. The view screen showed grainy footage of F-18 fighters engaging smaller alien craft, organic-looking fighters that moved with disturbing fluidity through Earth's atmosphere. Picard watched human pilots die in fireballs as plasma weapons tore through their aircraft like tissue paper. However, data continued, there is evidence of organized resistance. A United States military installation called Area 51 in Nevada has become a rallying point for surviving forces. Additionally, I have detected unusual data traffic suggesting a coordinated counteroffensive is being planned. Counteroffensive? Worf's tone carried skepticism. They possess no technology capable of penetrating those shields. Unknown, sir. However, analysis of their computer network traffic indicates significant activity centered around satellite communications and computer science facilities. Someone on Earth is attempting to find a vulnerability in the alien systems. Picard leaned against his command chair, processing this. 1996 Earth shouldn't have the technological sophistication to even analyze alien computer systems, let alone exploit them. Yet throughout history, humanity had demonstrated remarkable adaptability when facing extinction. He thought of the eugenics wars that had ravaged this very planet just 4 years ago in this timeline, of the post-atomic horror that would come in the next century. Humanity's capacity for both destruction and salvation had always existed in parallel. Captain, Crusher's voice drew his attention to where she stood near the science station. I've been reviewing historical medical databases. July 1996. Do you know what else happened this month in the original timeline? Picard searched his memory. The Mars Pathfinder mission. Yes, but also something more personal. On July 15, 1996, a physician named Beverly Howard was supposed to attend a medical conference in San Francisco. Crusher's voice was carefully controlled. My grandmother. If San Francisco burns before that conference, she never meets the colleague who introduces her to my grandfather. I'm never born. My son is never born. And Commander Data, the cybernetics researcher who laid the theoretical groundwork for your positronic brain, won't survive the week because he's currently living in Tokyo. The implications hung in the air like a weapon. Every person on this bridge owed their existence to the timeline where Earth survived the next 72 hours. But that timeline required them to do, what? Save Earth? Or let it burn? There's another possibility you're not considering, Troy said softly. What if this invasion never happened in our timeline because we stop it? What if our presence here is the reason Earth survives? A predestination paradox, Picard murmured. We save Earth because we travel back in time, and we only exist to travel back in time because we saved Earth. It's one theory, Riker said. The other theory is that we're in an alternate timeline and anything we do here doesn't affect our future at all. Or, LaForge added grimly from the engineering station, we're in our timeline and if we interfere, we create a temporal split that erases everything we know. Picard closed his eyes. Starfleet Academy taught clear protocols for temporal displacement: observe, record, and under no circumstances interfere. The Department of Temporal Investigations had investigated hundreds of cases where well-meaning officers had attempted to fix the past, creating cascade failures that required years to repair. He knew the regulations. He believed in them. But regulations were written for scenarios where millions of lives weren't hanging in the balance. Mr. Data, Picard said, opening his eyes. You mentioned detecting a counteroffensive being planned. Can you determine their strategy? Data's fingers flew across his console. Accessing. Captain, I have isolated communications between Area 51 and the spacecraft in Earth orbit. It appears a team including a computer expert and a military pilot successfully captured one of the alien fighter craft. They are attempting to interface Earth computer systems with alien technology. To do what? Worf demanded. To upload a computer virus, sir. The logic is crude but potentially effective. If they can disable the mothership's defensive shields, Earth's nuclear arsenal could destroy it. With the mothership destroyed, the city destroyer vessels would theoretically be vulnerable. Picard felt a cold chill. A computer virus. In 1996, with technology that still used binary code and copper wiring, someone down there had conceived of cyber warfare against an interstellar invasion force. It was audacious. It was desperate. It was very, very human. What are the odds of success? Picard asked. Data's pause was infinitesimal but telling. Difficult to calculate with precision, Captain. The plan requires successfully docking with the mothership, bypassing alien security protocols, uploading the virus, escaping before detonation, and coordinating a global nuclear strike within a precise time window. I estimate probability of complete success at 34.7%. 34%. One chance in 3. Picard walked to the view screen, looking down at Earth. From this distance, the planet appeared peaceful. A blue marble hanging in the void, exactly as it had looked in the photographs taken by Apollo astronauts 30 years ago in this timeline. No orbital platforms. No deflector grids. No fleet of starships standing guard. Just 6 billion people who didn't know the Federation existed, who had never heard of the Prime Directive, who were about to die if a 1 in 3 chance didn't pay off. Captain, Worf's voice rumbled with barely controlled fury. With respect, sir, 34% is not acceptable. We have photon torpedoes. We have phasers. We could destroy every one of those vessels in under 10 minutes. And in doing so, we would reveal the existence of 24th century technology to a pre-warp civilization, Picard countered. We would fundamentally alter the course of human development. First contact with the Vulcans happens in 2063 when Zephram Cochrane breaks the warp barrier. If humanity knows faster-than-light travel exists in 1996, does Cochrane still make that journey? Does humanity still reach for the stars on their own merit, or do they spend the next century trying to reverse engineer our technology? Better that than extinction, Riker said quietly. Picard turned to face his first officer. Is it? Number 1, what makes humanity special in the Federation? What makes Earth the heart of Starfleet? Riker frowned, understanding where Picard was going but not liking it. Our diversity. Our drive to explore. Our ability to unite different species under common ideals. Exactly. And all of that emerged from humanity's journey from a fractured, warring planet to a unified world that reached the stars on its own. If we hand them salvation, if we show them the future and rob them of the struggle to achieve it themselves, Picard shook his head. We might save their lives but kill their spirit. Some of them might prefer to be alive, Crusher said dryly. Doctor. Captain, I understand the philosophy. I do. But we're not talking about teaching them warp theory or giving them replicators. We're talking about watching billions of people die when we have the power to prevent it. Crusher's voice rose with emotion. My grandmother is down there. Your ancestors are down there. Every human being who ever contributed to the Federation is down there, and in 72 hours they'll all be dead unless that 34% chance works out. The ready room fell silent. Picard looked around at his crew, at the faces of people he trusted with his life, people who had followed him through impossible situations, people who were now asking him to make a choice no captain should have to make. Mr. Data, Picard said finally. Continue monitoring Earth's resistance efforts. I want real-time updates on this virus plan. Mr. LaForge, begin analyzing the alien shield frequencies. Theoretical analysis only, no active scans that might reveal our position. Sir. LaForge's tone was questioning. We're not going to destroy those ships, Mr. LaForge. But perhaps, Picard paused, the plan forming as he spoke. Perhaps we can improve Earth's odds without revealing ourselves. Data, you said their shields rotate on a modulation frequency. Correct, sir. I have isolated the pattern. It repeats every 4.3 seconds. And if someone on Earth knew that pattern, they could time their attacks to strike during the frequency transition windows. Brief moments when the shields are weakest. Understanding dawned on Riker's face. You want to help them without them knowing we're helping. I want, Picard corrected carefully, to observe this situation closely and ensure that any technical malfunctions in the alien systems are properly documented for temporal investigations. Should such malfunctions coincidentally benefit Earth's defensive efforts, that would be an unfortunate side effect of the temporal anomaly that brought us here. A slow smile spread across Riker's face. Plausible deniability. Temporal mechanics are notoriously unpredictable. Number 1. Who's to say what effects our presence in this time period might have on local technology? Worf's expression suggested he found this reasoning somewhat dubious but acceptable. Crusher looked marginally less distressed. Troy's empathic senses were undoubtedly screaming that Picard was rationalizing, but she said nothing. Data, however, tilted his head with curiosity. Captain, you are proposing to violate the Temporal Prime Directive while maintaining the appearance of compliance. I'm proposing, Mr. Data, that we observe history very carefully and ensure it unfolds as it should. Now, all of you back to your stations. We have 68 hours until Data's calculated extinction timeline completes. I want to know everything about those ships, their tactics, and their weaknesses. And I want to know the instant Earth's counterattack begins. The senior staff dispersed, purpose replacing helplessness. Picard returned to the command chair, his eyes fixed on the viewscreen where Earth hung suspended in darkness. He had just committed to violating the most sacred directive in Starfleet temporal regulations. History would judge whether he'd saved the timeline or doomed it. But he would not, could not, watch Earth die while he did nothing. For 16 hours, the Enterprise remained hidden behind the moon while Earth burned. Picard had ordered continuous monitoring of the planet's datanet, and what Data's analysis revealed painted a picture of humanity at its worst and finest simultaneously. Looting had erupted in cities not yet destroyed. Governments had collapsed as officials fled or died. Religious zealots proclaimed the end times while others insisted the invasion was an elaborate hoax. Yet amid the chaos, Picard also witnessed acts of extraordinary courage, rescue workers digging through rubble with bare hands, doctors treating the wounded in makeshift field hospitals, strangers sharing food and shelter with refugees streaming away from targeted cities. And in the Nevada desert, at a military installation that officially didn't exist, a desperate plan was taking shape. Captain, Data called from Ops. I have successfully isolated the communications between Area 51 and the alien mothership insertion team. The virus upload attempt will commence in approximately 42 minutes. Picard leaned forward. Show me. The view screen split into multiple data streams, intercepts of radio communications, satellite imagery, and Data's analytical projections. Picard watched as two men in a captured alien fighter prepared for a suicide mission that would make them either humanity's saviors or its last, desperate footnote. The pilot is Captain Stephen Hiller, United States Marine Corps, Data narrated. The computer expert is David Levinson, a satellite technician from New York. Their plan requires docking with the mothership, uploading a virus to disable its shields, transmitting a signal to coordinate Earth's nuclear strike, and escaping before detonation. What kind of virus are we talking about? LaForge asked from engineering, his voice crackling over the comm. Data brought up a schematic of primitive binary code that made LaForge whistle low. It is remarkably simple, Commander. The virus essentially creates a recursive loop in the mothership's shield generation subroutine, causing a cascading system failure. Crude, but potentially effective given the alien computer architecture appears to be partially biological in nature. Biological computers? Picard's interest sharpened. Explain. The alien technology integrates organic components into their computational systems, Data continued. This creates processing advantages but also vulnerabilities. A traditional computer virus would be ineffective, but Mr. Levinson's code exploits the biological interface protocols. He essentially created a digital pathogen. Picard found himself impressed despite the circumstances. In 1996, Earth's computer technology was primitive by Federation standards, they still used physical keyboards and cathode ray displays, for God's sake. Yet someone had intuited enough about alien technology to weaponize their own systems against them. It was exactly the kind of adaptive thinking that would eventually make humanity a key species in the Federation. Captain, Worf's voice carried an edge of alarm. I am detecting unusual energy signatures from the alien mothership. They are scanning the lunar surface. Picard's blood went cold. Are we being targeted? Negative. The scans appear to be broad-spectrum searches, not focused sensor locks. However, Worf paused, his tactical display painting new threat vectors. Sir, they are searching for something. Energy patterns suggest they are attempting to locate a specific anomaly. Us, Troy said softly from her seat beside Picard. They know something doesn't belong here. Data's fingers flew across his console. Counselor Troy's assessment appears accurate. I am detecting increased subspace distortion emanating from our position. The temporal vortex that transported us here left residual chronoton radiation in our warp core. To the alien sensors, we would appear as an unexplained temporal anomaly. How long before they pinpoint our location? Picard demanded. Unknown, sir. Their scanning technology is unfamiliar. However, based on current search patterns, I estimate they will isolate our position within 12 hours, well before the planned nuclear strike. Riker stood, moving to tactical to review Worf's displays. Captain, if they find us before that virus gets uploaded, they might redirect resources to investigate. That could expose the insertion team. Or, Picard said grimly, they might decide Earth has hidden allies and accelerate their extermination timeline. The bridge fell silent as the implications settled over them. Their mere presence, their attempt to observe without interfering, was itself becoming an interference. The temporal mechanics textbooks called this the observer's paradox, the impossibility of watching history unfold without affecting it. Options, Picard said crisply. We could relocate to a different hiding position, Riker suggested. Put more distance between us and their search pattern. They will simply expand their search radius, Worf countered. And any movement risks revealing our position through engine emissions. We could eliminate the chronoton radiation, LaForge's voice came through the comm, vent the contaminated plasma and purge the warp core. It'd take us offline for 6 hours, but we'd disappear from their sensors. Leaving us unable to maneuver if we're discovered, Picard noted. What about using our shields to contain the radiation? Already doing that, sir. The shields are holding, but the radiation is bleeding through at the quantum level. Give it enough time and they'll detect it. Picard stood, pacing the short distance between his chair and the view screen. Every option carried unacceptable risk. Relocate and they might be spotted. Shut down systems and they'd be helpless. Maintain position and they'd eventually be found. The trap was closing around them exactly as it was closing around Earth, different enemies, same desperate odds. Captain, Data interrupted his thoughts. The insertion team has launched. I am tracking their approach to the mothership. The view screen shifted to show a computer-enhanced view of the captured alien fighter ascending from Earth's atmosphere. Picard watched the small craft, so primitive compared to a Federation shuttlecraft, so fragile against the enormity of the alien mothership it was approaching, and felt an ache of recognition. That fighter represented everything Starfleet stood for. Courage in the face of overwhelming odds, ingenuity when outgunned, and the refusal to accept extinction quietly. Time to docking? Picard asked. 18 minutes, Captain. However, I am detecting a complication. Data's voice carried a note of concern that was unusual for the android. The mothership is deploying additional fighter screens around its primary docking bay. They appear to be increasing security protocols. Do they suspect the insertion team? Unknown. It may be a standard response to the temporal anomaly they're searching for. However, the effect is the same. The insertion team's odds of success have decreased from 34.7% to 21.3%. 21%. Just over 1 chance in 5. Picard made his decision. Mr. Worf, I want a full tactical analysis of that mothership's fighter deployment. Look for gaps in their coverage, weak points where a fighter might slip through unnoticed. Worf's expression showed he understood exactly what Picard was suggesting. Sir, if we provide that information to the insertion team. We won't. Picard cut him off. But we will experience a sudden transporter malfunction that creates brief subspace interference in precisely the right locations to disrupt alien fighter sensors. Completely accidental, of course. A side effect of our chronometric radiation. A ghost of a smile crossed Worf's face. Of course, Captain. I will prepare the transporter malfunction coordinates immediately. And Mr. Data, I want continuous monitoring of the virus upload. The moment it begins, I want to know if it's working. Captain, Troy said carefully, you're walking a very fine line. I'm aware of that, Counselor. But history doesn't record mysterious transporter malfunctions helping Earth during the 1996 invasion. Which means either we're careful enough not to be noticed, or, he didn't finish the thought. Or they were always part of this history and didn't know it. The minutes ticked past with agonizing slowness. Picard watched the alien fighter approach the mothership, a 15-mile-wide construct that made even the Enterprise look small by comparison. The ship was a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical design, its surface pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that suggested it was as much living creature as spacecraft. Docking in 90 seconds, Data reported. I am detecting increased energy signatures from the mothership's internal systems. They are, Captain, they are bringing additional weapons online. I believe they are preparing to fire on the planet again. Picard's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair. More cities. More millions dead. Unless the virus worked. Unless two brave men in a stolen fighter craft could accomplish what Earth's entire military couldn't. Insertion team has docked, Data announced. They are inside the mothership. On the main viewer, Picard saw the fighter disappear into one of the massive docking bays that pockmarked the mothership's hull. For a moment, everything hung in balance. Then Worf spoke, his voice carefully neutral. Captain, the transporter malfunction is ready. Subspace interference will generate in 3, 2, 1, now. The Enterprise's transporter systems engaged in rapid-fire sequence, creating brief bursts of subspace static that propagated through the quantum foam of spacetime. To anyone monitoring, it would appear as random fluctuations, background noise from the temporal anomaly. But those fluctuations just happened to blind specific alien fighter sensors for precisely 4 seconds each, creating momentary gaps in their coverage pattern. Gaps that a skilled pilot flying a captured alien craft might exploit to reach the docking bay unnoticed. Malfunction complete, Worf reported. Alien fighters are repositioning. They appear, confused. No evidence of detection? Picard asked. None, sir. Picard allowed himself a breath. One small push. One tiny violation of the Temporal Prime Directive, dressed up as mechanical failure. He told himself it didn't matter, that Levinson and Hiller were skilled enough to have made it through anyway. He told himself the 21% odds would have paid off regardless of Enterprise's intervention. He told himself a lot of things that might or might not be true. The virus upload has commenced, Data announced, his voice cutting through Picard's self-doubt. I am monitoring the mothership systems. The virus is propagating through their biological computer architecture. Shield subroutines are beginning to fail. Captain, it's working. On the view screen, the mothership's surface rippled with energy discharges as its defensive systems fought against the digital pathogen spreading through its core. The bioluminescent patterns flickered and died in spreading waves. Picard watched a 340-mile diameter warship. A vessel that had crossed the galaxy to harvest Earth's resources and exterminate its population, brought to its knees by a few lines of binary code written by a satellite technician from New York. Their shields are down, Worf confirmed, his voice carrying savage satisfaction. The mothership is vulnerable. Earth's nuclear forces are launching, Data added. I detect multiple missile trajectories converging on the mothership. Time to impact, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. What about the insertion team? Picard demanded. Have they escaped? Data's pause was fractionally longer than usual. I am scanning, yes, Captain. Their fighter is departing the docking bay. However, they are being pursued by multiple alien craft. I calculate a 73% probability they will be destroyed before reaching Earth's atmosphere. 73%. Nearly 3/4 odds of dying just moments from salvation. Riker looked at Picard. Sir. Picard closed his eyes. He'd already crossed the line once. What was one more transgression in service of ensuring history unfolded correctly? Mr. Worf, Picard said quietly, I believe our transporter is about to experience another malfunction. Sir. A very unfortunate malfunction that will create subspace interference directly in the flight path of those pursuing alien fighters. Quite unfortunate. Make it so. The Enterprise's transporters hummed again, creating curtains of subspace static that propagated across thousands of kilometers. The pursuing alien fighters flew directly into the interference, their organic sensors overloading, their targeting systems disrupted just long enough for a captured fighter carrying 2 desperate men to pull away and angle toward Earth's atmosphere. They're clear, Data reported. The insertion team is escaping. Picard opened his eyes, watching the mothership on the viewscreen as Earth's nuclear missiles streaked toward it. In 60 seconds, that massive vessel would be vaporized, its destruction rippling through the alien fleet's command structure, giving Earth a fighting chance to destroy the remaining city destroyers before they could complete their harvest. A fighting chance that now stood at just over 50% odds instead of 34%. Because the Enterprise had been here. Because Picard had chosen to violate the Temporal Prime Directive. Because sometimes, the right thing and the legal thing were not the same thing. Impact in 10 seconds, Data counted down. 9. 8. 7. Picard watched history unfold, or remake itself, one nuclear detonation at a time. The mothership died in an expanding sphere of nuclear fire that lit up the dark side of Earth like a second sun. Picard watched the vessel's hull rupture, internal atmosphere explosively decompressing as the cascade of warheads tore through its unshielded mass. For 3 seconds, the fireball was brighter than anything in the solar system except the star itself. Then the debris field began spreading, pieces of alien technology tumbling through orbit, some burning up in Earth's atmosphere, others spinning off into the void. Mothership destroyed, Worf confirmed with grim satisfaction. Scanning remaining alien vessels. They are. Captain, they are experiencing systematic failures. Data's fingers danced across his console. The City Destroyer-class vessels appear to have been networked to the mothership's central processing core. With the mothership destroyed, they are losing coordinated command functions. Their weapons systems are powering down. On the view screen, Picard watched as the massive disc-shaped vessels hovering over Earth's cities began to drift aimlessly. The perfect geometric precision of their positioning degraded into random movement. Some began to list, their anti-gravity systems fluctuating. One over Houston actually began to fall before stabilizing, its underbelly scraping the tops of skyscrapers before it managed to gain altitude again. Earth forces are engaging, Worf reported. I am detecting fighter craft approaching multiple city destroyers. They are targeting what appear to be primary weapon systems on the vessel's undersides. Picard leaned forward, watching grainy satellite imagery of F/A-18 fighters. Primitive chemical thrust aircraft that would look comically outdated in a Starfleet museum, screaming through the air toward openings in the alien ships' hulls. The pilots flew with suicidal precision, threading through defensive fire to deliver missiles directly into the vulnerable weapon ports. One vessel over Los Angeles is losing structural integrity, Data announced. Hull breach detected. It is descending rapidly. The city destroyer tilted, its massive bulk rotating as internal explosions rippled through its structure. It fell in terrible slow motion, a 15-mile diameter disk of alien metal that had killed millions now becoming a tomb for its own crew. The impact with the California desert sent shockwaves visible from orbit, a dust plume rising kilometers into the atmosphere. Houston destroyer is down, Worf counted. Dallas. Atlanta. Beijing. Moscow. Each name was punctuated by another explosion on the view screen as Earth's scattered forces concentrated their fire on vessels that could no longer coordinate their defenses. Captain, the alien fleet is being systematically destroyed. Picard felt tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying begin to ease. It was working. Earth was winning. Against impossible odds, with primitive technology and desperate courage, humanity was driving back an extinction-level threat. Then Data spoke, his tone carrying a new urgency. Captain, the alien search pattern for our temporal anomaly has ceased. However, I am detecting 3 city destroyer-class vessels breaking from engagement over Europe. They are ascending to orbital altitude. Retreating? Riker suggested. Negative, sir. Their trajectory is, Data paused, running calculations. They are heading directly toward the moon. Toward our position. The bridge went quiet. Picard felt ice reform in his stomach. Time to intercept. At current velocity, 47 minutes. Worf, can we relocate without being detected? Not at impulse speeds, Captain. They would track our engine emissions. We could use thrusters only, but that would not give us sufficient velocity to escape their approach vector. Then they found us, Picard said quietly. The mothership's destruction had apparently freed individual vessels to act autonomously, and 3 of them had decided the temporal anomaly was worth investigating. Mr. LaForge, what's our status on that warp core purge? LaForge's voice came back immediately. Still need 4 hours minimum to flush the chronoton radiation, sir. And we'd be dead in space while we did it. Picard stood, moving to the tactical display where Worf had plotted the approaching vessels' trajectories. 3 city destroyers, each 15 miles in diameter, each capable of generating enough directed energy to vaporize a major metropolitan area. Even damaged and uncoordinated, they represented overwhelming firepower. Captain, Troy said carefully, if they reach us, if they engage the Enterprise, Earth's sensors will detect the battle. Revealing advanced Federation technology to a pre-warp civilization, Picard finished. Violating the Prime Directive in the most visible way possible. We could destroy them, Worf said bluntly. 3 quantum torpedoes, maximum yield. They would not survive long enough to transmit our presence to Earth. And leave 3 15-mile-wide debris fields in lunar orbit that Earth's astronomers would immediately begin studying, Riker countered. Debris that would contain 24th-century torpedo signatures, hull fragments unlike anything in known aerospace engineering, evidence that someone intervened in their invasion. Picard returned to his command chair, mind racing through scenarios. They could run, jump to warp and escape this time period entirely. But that would mean abandoning their observation of events, leaving Earth's fate to chance. The battle was turning in humanity's favor, but it wasn't over. There were still dozens of city destroyers over population centers, still billions of lives at risk. How many vessels remain over Earth? Picard asked. Data consulted his display. 43 city destroyer-class vessels are still operational. Earth forces have destroyed 18. However, without coordinated command from the mothership, the remaining vessels are vulnerable to the same tactics that proved successful. I calculate an 87% probability that Earth will achieve complete victory within the next 6 hours. 87%. Much better than the 34 they'd started with. Much better than the 21 before Enterprise had malfunctioned to help the insertion team. Humanity would survive. The timeline would continue. First contact would happen in 67 years, and everything that followed would unfold as it should. All they had to do was leave. Number 1, Picard said quietly, prepare a course that will take us clear of the lunar far side and allow for immediate warp jump. We'll need to time our departure to avoid detection by Earth's satellites. Sir. Riker's tone carried surprise. We're running. We're ensuring the timeline remains intact, Picard corrected. Our mission was to observe, and we've observed enough. Earth is going to win this fight without our help. But if we stay and engage those vessels, we risk revealing ourselves. Better to leave now while we can. Captain, Worf's voice carried an unusual note of uncertainty. We are Starfleet officers. Those vessels are a threat to this planet. To refuse battle is to honor the principles we serve, Picard cut him off, though not unkindly. Lieutenant, I understand your warrior's instinct. But there's no honor in contaminating the timeline to satisfy our need for combat. We've done what we can. Now we need to trust that humanity can finish what they started. The words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Picard looked around his bridge. At Worf's barely suppressed frustration, at Riker's conflicted expression, at Data's neutral analysis, at Troy's empathic understanding of the competing duties tearing at them all. Captain, Data interrupted, I am detecting a complication. One of the approaching city destroyers is adjusting course. It is no longer heading toward our position. They've lost our signal? Picard asked hopefully. Negative, sir. The vessel is descending toward Earth. Specifically, toward the remains of Washington, D.C. The view screen shifted to show the alien vessel beginning atmospheric entry. Picard watched its massive bulk pushing through the thermosphere, heading toward a city that had already been devastated in the initial attacks. Why return to a target they've already destroyed? Riker wondered aloud. Unknown, Data replied. However, I am detecting increased energy signatures from Earth in that region. Captain, Area 51's command center has relocated to what remains of Washington. The President of the United States and key military commanders are coordinating the global counteroffensive from that location. Understanding crashed over Picard like a wave. The alien vessel wasn't returning to finish destroying the city, it was hunting the human command structure. Without the mothership coordinating them, this vessel had defaulted to a simpler protocol: find the enemy's leaders and eliminate them. If they succeed, Troy said softly, Earth loses its command coordination. The counteroffensive falls apart. Probability of Earth victory drops from 87% to 43%, Data confirmed. Captain, the vessel will reach weapons range in 9 minutes. Picard felt the trap close around him with mathematical precision. If they left now, Earth's leadership died, the offensive collapsed, and humanity's survival became a coin flip. If they stayed and engaged, they risked timeline contamination. Both choices violated something fundamental, either the Temporal Prime Directive or the core principle that had driven him to join Starfleet in the first place. The other two vessels, Picard asked tightly. Still approaching our position? Affirmative. Time to intercept now 41 minutes. 41 minutes. If they engaged the vessel over Washington, they'd have barely enough time to destroy it and escape before the other two arrived. But any engagement meant weapons fire, meant evidence of advanced technology intervening in Earth's war. The question was whether that contamination was worth preventing the collapse of humanity's defense. Captain, Crusher's voice came over the comm from sickbay, I'm monitoring Earth's emergency broadcasts. There are reports of a vessel heading toward Washington. The evacuation order just went out but, she paused. There's not enough time. The President is refusing to leave the command post. He's staying to coordinate the defense. Of course he was. Picard would have done the same. Any captain worth the rank stayed on the bridge when their ship was threatened. The man leading Earth's resistance wouldn't abandon his post now, not when the battle was still being decided. Data, Picard said, his voice hardening with decision, I need detailed tactical data on that city destroyer. Shield frequencies, weapons targeting, structural weak points. Everything. Sir, our active sensors would be detected. I'm aware. Do it anyway. Data's fingers flew across the console. Scanning now. Captain, the vessel's shields are operating at 60% capacity. They have sustained damage from earlier engagements. Primary weapon system is charging but targeting sensors appear degraded. I am detecting multiple hull breaches on their port side. Picard studied the tactical display, his mind running through attack patterns and engagement strategies. The vessel was wounded, which meant it was vulnerable. But it was also desperate, which made it unpredictable. Mr. Worf, load quantum torpedoes. Set yield to maximum. Worf's hands moved across tactical without hesitation. Torpedoes loaded and ready, Captain. Number 1, plot an intercept course. Full impulse. We'll have one pass, maybe two, before those other vessels reach us. We need to make it count. Riker moved to the helm, displacing the junior officer there. Course plotted. On your order, sir. Picard looked at his crew, at the faces of people who had followed him through impossible situations, who trusted his judgment even when he wasn't sure he trusted it himself. They were about to violate the Temporal Prime Directive in the most flagrant way possible. They were about to reveal the Enterprise's presence to an entire planet. They were about to take an action that could rewrite 4 centuries of history. And yet, looking down at Earth on the view screen, watching a wounded alien vessel descending toward the ruins of Washington, D.C. Picard knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't stand by and watch humanity's leadership die when he had the power to prevent it. All hands, Picard's voice carried throughout the ship, this is the captain. We are about to engage an alien vessel in defense of Earth. What we do in the next few minutes may violate regulations we've sworn to uphold. But those regulations were written to protect the timeline, and I believe our presence here is part of that timeline. Trust your training. Trust each other. And remember that we are Starfleet. We don't abandon those in need, no matter what century they're from. He settled into his command chair, feeling the weight of command settle over him like an old coat. Mr. Riker, Picard said quietly, take us in. The Enterprise D broke from behind the moon, her impulse engines flaring to full power as she accelerated toward Earth, toward battle, toward destiny, toward a choice that would echo through the centuries. The Enterprise D swept around the lunar limb like a raptor emerging from shadow, her pristine white hull catching the reflected light of Earth's sun. On the bridge, Picard felt the familiar hum of combat readiness, shields at maximum, weapons hot, every system primed for engagement. It was a sensation he'd experienced 100 times before, but never while knowing that an entire planet's primitive sensors were about to detect something that shouldn't exist in their timeline. Time to intercept? Picard asked. For minutes, 30 seconds, Riker replied from the helm, his hand steady on the controls. The city destroyer is entering Washington's airspace now. The view screen showed the massive alien disk descending through cloud cover, its hull scorched and pitted from earlier battles. Energy crackled along its damaged sections, and Picard could see atmosphere venting from several breaches. The vessel was dying, but like any mortally wounded animal, it was still deadly. Captain, Data called out, I am detecting energy buildup in their primary weapon system. They are preparing to fire on the Presidential Command Center. Time to weapons range for us. 3 minutes, 15 seconds. Sir, they will fire before we can intervene. Picard's jaw tightened. They were going to be too late. The Enterprise was crossing thousands of kilometers at full impulse, but space was vast and time was merciless. He watched the alien vessel's weapon ports begin to glow with gathering energy, watched the death of Earth's leadership approaching with mathematical certainty. Captain, Worf's voice carried a dangerous edge, I can fire quantum torpedoes from current range. At maximum velocity, they would reach the target 45 seconds before their weapon fires. From this range? Riker turned in his seat. Worf, we're talking about firing through Earth's atmosphere. The trajectory calculations alone are well within my capabilities, Worf finished. I have a firing solution. It will work. Picard hesitated. Firing from this range meant their torpedoes would streak through Earth's sky like meteors, visible to anyone looking up. There would be no hiding their intervention, no maintaining the illusion of non-interference. Every radar installation, every satellite, every amateur astronomer on the night side of the planet would detect energy signatures that defied explanation. 30 seconds to their weapons discharge, Data announced. 25. 20. Captain, Troy's voice was quiet but steady, if we don't act now, we'll be too late. Picard looked at her, saw the same conflict he felt reflected in her dark eyes. They had already crossed so many lines. What was one more? Mr. Worf, Picard said, his voice carrying the weight of decision, fire. 2 quantum torpedoes launched from the Enterprise's forward array, their brilliant blue contrails cutting through the darkness of space like surgical strikes of light. Picard watched them accelerate, crossing the distance between ship and target in seconds, their navigation systems adjusting trajectory as they entered Earth's upper atmosphere. Impact in 10 seconds, Worf counted. 9. 8. 7. On the view screen, the city destroyer's weapon ports reached critical charge, energy coalescing into a beam that would vaporize everything within a 15-mile radius. The alien vessel prepared to fire, its targeting systems locked on the ruins of Washington, D.C., on the bunker where Earth's president and military commanders directed humanity's desperate resistance. 3. 2. 1. Impact. The quantum torpedoes struck the city destroyer's port side simultaneously, their matter-antimatter warheads detonating with precisely calibrated yield. The explosions tore through the vessel's already compromised shields, ripping into hull plating and venting the internal atmosphere in massive plumes. The alien ship shuddered, its weapon discharge interrupted as power systems failed catastrophically. Direct hit, Worf reported with satisfaction. Their primary weapon system is destroyed. Hull integrity failing across multiple sections. But the city destroyer didn't die quietly. As it began to fall, tumbling through the atmosphere in a death spiral, its automatic defense systems activated. Smaller weapons ports along its hull opened, tracking the torpedo's trajectory back to their source. Captain. Data's warning came sharp. They are attempting to lock weapons on our position. Evasive maneuvers, Picard ordered. Keep us between them and the moon. I don't want Earth's satellites getting a clear view of the Enterprise. Riker's hands flew across the helm, rolling the massive starship to port as the alien vessel fired. Plasma bolts, primitive compared to phasers but still deadly, streaked upward through the atmosphere, reaching toward orbit. Most dispersed harmlessly into space, but 3 found their mark, slamming into the Enterprise's forward shields. The ship rocked hard. Picard gripped his armrests as consoles sparked and the lights flickered. Shields holding at 87%, Worf reported. Minor damage to the deflector array. We can withstand their weapons indefinitely. Return fire, Picard commanded. Phasers only. Target their remaining weapon systems. I want that ship disabled, not vaporized. Orange beams of directed energy lanced from the Enterprise's phaser arrays, striking the tumbling city destroyer with surgical precision. Each shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy. Worf was threading the needle between neutralizing the threat and creating a debris field that would rain exotic materials onto Washington. Their weapons are offline, Worf confirmed. The vessel is in uncontrolled descent. Impact with the Chesapeake Bay in 90 seconds. Picard watched the massive disk fall, trailing fire and debris. In 90 seconds it would hit the water, and the resulting impact would create tidal waves that would devastate what remained of the eastern seaboard. Thousands more would die, drowned by the ship they'd just saved them from. Mr. Data, can we control their descent? Data's fingers danced across his console. Possibly, sir. If I can interface with their anti-gravity systems using our tractor beam as a carrier wave, I may be able to slow their fall. However, the precision required. Do it, Picard ordered. We didn't save those people just to drown them. The Enterprise's tractor beam engaged, a focused graviton field reaching down through atmosphere to grasp the falling vessel. Data worked with intense concentration, using the beam to access the city destroyer's damaged systems, coaxing their anti-gravity generators back to minimal function. I have established a connection, Data reported. Attempting to stabilize their descent. This is difficult, Captain. Their systems are biological in nature. The interface protocols are highly resistant to external manipulation. The city destroyer's fall began to slow, not much, but enough. Its tumble stabilized into a controlled descent. Picard watched altitude readings drop, 20 kilometers, 15, 10, 5. The vessel was still going to crash, but now it would impact at survivable velocity rather than apocalyptic. 3 kilometers, Data counted down. 2. 1. Impact. The city destroyer hit the Chesapeake Bay with enough force to send a waterspout 300 meters into the air. The shockwave radiated outward, creating waves that surged toward shore, but waves measured in meters rather than the hundreds of meters an uncontrolled impact would have generated. Devastating, but not extinction level. Vessel neutralized, Worf confirmed. No further threat detected. Picard allowed himself a breath. They'd done it. Earth's command structure was safe, the counteroffensive would continue, humanity would. Captain. Data's voice cut through his relief. The 2 remaining city destroyers have altered course. They are no longer approaching the moon. They are descending toward Earth. Specifically, toward our current position. The view screen shifted to show 2 massive alien vessels breaking from orbital altitude, atmospheric friction beginning to superheat their forward sections as they plunged downward. They were coming in fast and aggressive, abandoning their search for the temporal anomaly in favor of engaging the unknown vessel that had just destroyed one of their own. They're coming for us, Riker said quietly. Time to intercept. Picard demanded. 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Captain, if we engage them here, directly over the eastern seaboard, Riker didn't need to finish. Every weapon fired, every explosion, every piece of falling debris would be witnessed by millions. Reading their approach vectors, Worf announced. They are attempting to bracket us, one from north, one from south. Classic pincer formation. Picard's mind raced through tactical options. They could run, jump to warp and escape. But 2 enraged city destroyers would simply redirect their fury at the nearest target, what remained of Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia. Without the Enterprise to distract them, they'd complete their original mission of eliminating Earth's leadership. Or the Enterprise could stand and fight, engaging in a space battle above Earth's atmosphere that would be recorded by every sensor on the planet. Captain, Troy said urgently, I'm detecting changes in their emotional resonance. They're not just attacking, they're afraid. Confused. The hive mind connection they relied on is gone. They're operating on individual survival instinct now. Wounded animals, Picard murmured. The most dangerous kind. 43 Earth fighter craft are breaking off from other engagements, Data reported. They are forming up to intercept the city destroyers. Captain, the humans are trying to help us. Picard looked at the tactical display, saw the tiny icons representing F divided by a -18s, F-16s, even older aircraft pulled from museums and training bases. Everything Earth could throw into the sky, converging on the 2 alien vessels. They'd seen the Enterprise engage the first destroyer. They'd watched something from beyond their world save their leadership. And now, with the courage that defined humanity at its best, they were trying to return the favor. With weapons that couldn't penetrate the aliens' shields. With aircraft that would be swatted from the sky like insects. Hail those fighters, Picard ordered. All frequencies. Sir, Data replied, we have no established communication protocols with 1996 Earth military. Then establish them. Now. Data's fingers flew across the console, the Enterprise's universal translator working to convert Picard's words into signals that primitive radio equipment could receive. After a moment, Data nodded. "Channel open, Captain." Extremely crude, but functional. Picard took a breath. In the next few seconds, he would speak directly to pre-warp humans, violating the Prime Directive in a way that couldn't be rationalized or explained away. The words he chose would be recorded, analyzed, and debated for centuries. If there were centuries left to debate them. "Attention Earth fighter craft," Picard said clearly. "This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. We are here to assist in the defense of your planet. Break off your attack vectors and maintain safe distance. We will handle the remaining hostile vessels." Static crackled across the channel. Then, after a long moment, a voice responded. Young, male, carrying the distinct accent of the American South and an edge of disbelief that transcended linguistics. "Enterprise, this is Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, U.S. Air Force." "Did you just say Federation Starship?" "That is correct, Colonel." "We are," Picard paused, searching for words that would make sense to a civilization that believed it was alone in the universe. "We are friends. We came to help." Another pause. Picard could almost hear the mental recalibration happening on the other end of the channel. Then Mitchell's voice came back, steadier now, the voice of a soldier accepting an impossible situation and adapting to it. "Well, Captain Picard, we sure as hell appreciate the assist. But those 2 city destroyers are heading your way fast, and our missiles don't do much more than tickle them. What do you need from us?" Picard felt an unexpected swell of emotion. Here was humanity confronting the impossible, the revelation that they weren't alone, that someone more advanced had been watching, that the universe was far stranger than they'd imagined, and their first response was to ask how they could help. This was why the Federation would one day be headquartered on Earth. "Colonel Mitchell," Picard said, "we need you to do exactly what you've been doing, survive, coordinate, and win. Leave these 2 vessels to us. Focus on destroying the remaining ships over your cities. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Consider it done." "And Captain?" Mitchell's voice carried a new quality, hope mixed with wonder. "Thanks for showing up. We were starting to think we were on our own out here." "You were never alone, Colonel." Picard out. The channel closed. Picard looked around his bridge, saw pride on every face. They had just made first contact with Earth, 67 years early, under circumstances no protocol had ever anticipated. And now they had to make sure Earth survived long enough for that contact to matter. "The city destroyers are entering weapons range," Worf announced. "They are charging their primary systems." "Battle stations," Picard commanded. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to engage in combat that will be witnessed by the entire planet below us. Let's show them what the Federation stands for." The Enterprise D turned to face the oncoming threat, her shields flaring to maximum as 2 city destroyers descended through Earth's atmosphere with murder in their targeting computers. The 2 city destroyers descended through the mesosphere like falling moons, their 15-mile diameters casting shadows across entire states. Picard watched them approach on the viewscreen, their hulls scarred from earlier battles but still formidable, still deadly. They were moving in perfect coordination despite the loss of their mothership, a testament to whatever biological programming drove their species. "Range, 200 kilometers and closing," Worf reported. "Both vessels are charging primary weapons. They will achieve firing solution in 40 seconds. Evasive pattern Delta 7, Picard ordered. Keep us moving. Don't give them a stationary target." The Enterprise rolled gracefully to starboard, her impulse engines burning bright against the blackness of space. Below them, Earth's night side glittered with the lights of cities not yet destroyed, a reminder of what they were fighting to preserve. "Captain," Data called out, "I am detecting unusual energy signatures from both vessels." They appear to be synchronizing their weapons' discharge. If they fire simultaneously at converging angles, our shields will be subjected to intersecting energy fields. The combined effect could overwhelm our defensive systems, Picard finished grimly. They're learning. Adapting their tactics to fight a more advanced opponent. 30 seconds to firing solution, Worf counted down. Picard's mind raced through tactical options. The Enterprise could easily destroy both vessels. A spread of quantum torpedoes would vaporize them before they could fire. But the resulting debris would rain across the eastern seaboard, and the explosions would be visible from half the planet. The contamination of the timeline would be total and irreversible. Mr. Worf, target their weapon systems only. Surgical strikes. I want them disabled, not destroyed. Aye, Captain. Phasers locked on primary weapon ports. Both vessels targeted. 20 seconds, data announced. 15. Fire. Orange phaser beams lanced through the thin upper atmosphere, striking both city destroyers with pinpoint accuracy. The beams burned through damaged hull plating, slicing into the organic-mechanical hybrids that served as the aliens' directed energy weapons. Explosions blossomed along both vessels' undersides as power conduits ruptured and biological components died. Direct hits, Worf confirmed. Their primary weapons are. The city destroyers fired. Not their main weapons. Those were destroyed, but secondary systems, smaller plasma cannons that dotted their hulls. Dozens of them, firing in coordinated salvos that filled the space between the vessels and the Enterprise with a wall of superheated energy. Evasive. Picard commanded, but there was nowhere to evade to. The plasma bolts were too numerous, too widely dispersed. The Enterprise's shields flared brilliant blue as bolt after bolt slammed into her deflectors. The ship shuddered violently. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The lights flickered, and for a heart-stopping moment, Picard felt the artificial gravity fluctuate. Shields down to 62%, Worf reported, his voice strained. Forward sections taking heavy fire. Recommend we withdraw to. Maintain position, Picard cut him off. If we retreat, they'll redirect to ground targets. We're the only thing keeping them focused on us instead of the cities below. Another volley of plasma fire struck home. The Enterprise groaned, her space frame absorbing punishment that would have destroyed any 20th century vessel 100 times over. Picard gripped his armrests, watching shield percentages drop, 58%, 53, 49. Captain, LaForge's voice came urgently over the comm, I'm reading power fluctuations in the port nacelle. If we keep taking hits like this, we're going to lose warp capability. Can you compensate? Working on it, but, another impact cut him off. When LaForge came back, his voice was tight. Sir, we've got a plasma fire on deck 12. Damage control teams are responding, but that last hit breached the hull. We've sealed the section, but we lost 2 crew members. Picard felt the words like a physical blow. 2 people dead. 2 Starfleet officers who'd followed him into this temporal anomaly, who'd trusted his judgment, who'd never make it home because he'd chosen to intervene in history. Shields at 41%, Worf announced. Captain, I recommend we target their hulls. A full phaser spread would. No, Picard said firmly. We're not creating a debris field over the eastern seaboard. Continue targeting their weapons systems. Torpedoes, minimum yield. I want the mission killed, not vaporized. Sir, at minimum yield, it will take multiple hits to neutralize each vessel. Then make multiple hits, Lieutenant. Worf's jaw clenched, but he obeyed. Firing torpedoes. For quantum torpedoes launched in rapid succession, streaking toward the city destroyers at relativistic velocity. They struck like hammers, each detonation carefully calibrated to disable rather than destroy. Weapons ports exploded. Hull sections buckled. Atmosphere vented from breaches. But the city destroyers kept fighting. "They're not breaking off," Riker observed, his hands working the helm to keep the Enterprise ahead of their targeting solutions. "They should be retreating. They're taking critical damage. They're operating on survival instinct now," Troy said, her hands pressed to her temples as she fought to process the alien emotional signatures. Fear. Rage. Pain. "They know they're dying, and they want to take us with them. Captain." Data's voice cut through with urgent precision. "Both vessels are redirecting all remaining power to their anti-gravity systems. They are, Captain, they are preparing to ram us." Picard's blood went cold. On the view screen, the two massive discs were reorienting, angling their prows directly at the Enterprise. Their engines flared with desperate intensity, accelerating them toward collision at speeds that would turn both ships into expanding clouds of vaporized metal. Time to impact. 47 seconds at current velocity and closure rate. Not enough time to jump to warp. Not enough time to build sufficient distance. The Enterprise could destroy them. One full spread of torpedoes at maximum yield would do it, but the resulting explosions would scatter radioactive debris across 3 states. "Tractor beam," Picard ordered suddenly. "Data, can we use the tractor beam to alter their trajectory? Push them off course." Data's fingers flew across his console, running calculations at superhuman speed. "Possible, Captain, but problematic. Their mass is considerable, and our tractor emitters were not designed to repel objects of this magnitude. Additionally, both vessels are generating significant thrust. We would be attempting to redirect 20 billion metric tons of accelerating mass. Can you do it or not?" "I can attempt it, sir. However, the strain on our tractor emitters will be extreme. There is an 83% probability of emitter failure." "Do it." The Enterprise's tractor beam engaged, but in reverse, pushing rather than pulling. Blue-white energy fields extended from the ship's forward array, creating invisible barriers against the approaching city destroyers. The effect was immediate and violent. The Enterprise's spaceframe groaned as contradictory forces warred against each other, the tractor beam pushing outward while the city destroyers' momentum carried them forward. "Tractor emitters at 140% of rated capacity," Data reported. 160%. 180%. "Captain, I am reading stress fractures forming in the primary emitter housing." On the view screen, the city destroyers slowed, but not enough. They were still coming, still accelerating, their biological pilots committed to ramming velocity regardless of the cost. 20 seconds to impact, Worf announced. "Reverse thrust." Picard commanded. "Full impulse, backward." Riker engaged the impulse engines in reverse, and the Enterprise began to retreat. But even her powerful engines couldn't generate sufficient backward velocity quickly enough. The city destroyers continued to close, their enormous bulk filling the view screen. 15 seconds. Picard's mind raced. They were out of time and options. He could order the torpedoes fired at maximum yield, save his ship and damn the timeline. Or he could hold position and let 2 dying alien vessels destroy the Enterprise, killing 400 crew members to preserve temporal integrity. Neither choice was acceptable. "Captain," Data said suddenly, "I have an alternative. The city destroyer's anti-gravity systems are biological in nature. If I modulate the tractor beam to interface with their organic components, I may be able to disrupt their propulsion on a cellular level. Like a neural disruptor." "Essentially, yes. However, the precision required is beyond my current computational capacity. I would need direct access to the ship's main computer core to perform the necessary calculations in real time." "Do it," Picard ordered. Data's hands moved in a blur across his console, establishing a direct neural link between his positronic brain and the Enterprise's main computer. For a brief moment, android and starship became one entity, processing power multiplying exponentially as biological and technological systems merged. 10 seconds, Worf counted. The tractor beam shifted, its frequency modulating through thousands of variations per second as Data searched for the precise harmonic that would resonate with the aliens' biological propulsion systems. The beam struck the lead city destroyer, and the vessel shuddered. Its smooth acceleration stuttered, engines misfiring as the tractor beam's modulated frequency disrupted the organic neural pathways controlling its anti-gravity generators. The ship began to tumble, its trajectory shifting from direct collision course to glancing blow. 5 seconds. Data shifted the beam to the second vessel, found the frequency, and disrupted its systems with equal efficiency. Both city destroyers veered off course, passing within meters of the Enterprise's hull. So close that Picard could see individual details of their alien architecture through the viewscreen, could see atmosphere venting from breaches, could see bioluminescent patterns flickering and dying as their biological components failed. The massive ships swept past, their momentum carrying them beyond the Enterprise and into the space above the Atlantic Ocean. Impact avoided, Data reported, his voice carrying a note of strain that suggested even his positronic brain had been taxed by the effort. However, Captain, both vessels are now in uncontrolled descent. They will impact the Atlantic Ocean in approximately 90 seconds. Picard watched the tumbling destroyers fall toward Earth's surface, calculating impact zones and consequences. 2 15-mile diameter vessels hitting the ocean would generate tsunami waves that would devastate coastal cities from Maine to Florida, from Portugal to Senegal. Millions would die, drowned by ships they didn't even know were falling. Data, can you control their descent like you did with the first destroyer? I can attempt it, Captain, but our tractor emitters are damaged from the overload. I have only partial functionality. Mr. LaForge, divert all available power to the tractor beam. Strip it from non-essential systems if you have to. Already on it, sir. You'll have whatever I can give you. Data engaged the tractor beam once more, his neural link to the ship's computer allowing him to compensate for the damaged emitters with adaptive algorithms. The beam caught the first falling destroyer, slowing its tumble, coaxing its dying anti-gravity systems back to minimal function. Altitude 50 kilometers, Data reported. 40. 30. This is proving more difficult than the first attempt, Captain. The damage to our emitters is extensive, and I am controlling 2 vessels instead of 1. You can do this, Data, Picard said quietly. The android's golden eyes never left his console. Yes, Captain. I can. The first city destroyer's fall slowed to survivable velocity, its trajectory shifted to aim for deep ocean rather than shallow coastal waters. It hit 300 kilometers east of Delaware, the impact sending up a waterspout visible from the coastline but generating waves measured in meters rather than hundreds of meters. The second destroyer proved more difficult. Its anti-gravity systems were more severely damaged, less responsive to Data's manipulation. It fell faster, tumbled harder, and when it struck the ocean 200 kilometers off the coast of Virginia, the impact was harder than optimal. The shockwave radiated outward, creating waves that would cause flooding in coastal areas, but flooding, not apocalypse. Damage, not extinction. Both vessels neutralized, Worf confirmed. Scanning for additional threats, negative. No more city destroyers within engagement range. Picard allowed himself to breathe. The Enterprise had survived. Earth had survived. The timeline was contaminated beyond repair, but at least there would still be a timeline to contaminate. Damage report. Shields at 12%, Worf reported. Multiple hull breaches on decks 10 through 15. Tractor emitters offline. Warp drive operational but running at 73% efficiency. Casualties, 2 dead, 17 injured. 2 dead. Picard closed his eyes briefly, adding their names to the ledger of cost for this intervention. Lieutenant Chen from Engineering. Ensign Markowitz from security. Both young. Both with families who would never know where or when they died. Captain, Data interrupted his thoughts. I am detecting increased activity from Earth's sensor networks. Multiple military installations are attempting to acquire targeting locks on our position. Additionally, civilian communication channels are experiencing massive traffic spikes. News of our intervention is spreading globally. Of course it was. They'd fought a battle above Earth's atmosphere, fired weapons visible from the ground, made radio contact with military forces. The cat wasn't just out of the bag, it was running through the streets announcing its presence. Show me, Picard ordered. The view screen shifted to display intercepts from Earth's primitive television and internet systems. Picard watched news anchors struggle to describe what they were seeing, watched amateur video of the Enterprise engaging the city destroyers, watched the social fabric of an entire civilization struggle to process the revelation that they weren't alone in the universe. And then he heard his own voice, recorded from the radio transmission to Colonel Mitchell, being played and replayed on every channel. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. We are here to assist in the defense of your planet. The Temporal Prime Directive wasn't just violated. It was shattered beyond any possibility of repair. Captain, Troy said softly, Earth is trying to hail us. Multiple channels, multiple languages. They want to know who we are. Where we came from. Why we helped them. Picard stared at the planet below, at the blue marble that would one day be the heart of the Federation, wondering what he'd just created, or destroyed. The Enterprise held position in high orbit, her damaged systems cycling through automated repairs while the crew processed the magnitude of what they'd just done. On the view screen, Earth continued its slow rotation, beautiful, fragile, and now irrevocably aware that someone had been watching from the stars. Picard sat in his ready room, staring at a cup of Earl Grey that had gone cold an hour ago. Reports from Data scrolled across his desktop monitor. Global communication networks were overwhelmed with speculation about the Federation Starship Enterprise. Amateur astronomers were tracking their orbital position. Military installations were painting them with radar. Religious leaders were calling it divine intervention. Scientists were demanding answers. Governments were convening emergency sessions. And Colonel Mitchell's simple question echoed through every channel, who are you? The door chimed. Come. Guinan entered, this time without brandy. She settled into the chair across from him and waited with her characteristic patience. I've destroyed the timeline, Picard said quietly. Have you? Guinan's tone was neutral. Or have you created it? Guinan, I made first contact with Earth 67 years early. I revealed advanced technology to a pre-warp civilization. I interfered in a planetary conflict. I violated every principle of the Temporal Prime Directive. You saved 6 billion lives. At what cost? Picard gestured to the monitor. First contact with the Vulcans is supposed to happen in 2063, when Zephram Cochrane breaks the warp barrier. It's humanity's achievement, their moment of reaching for the stars on their own merit. Now they know warp-capable civilizations exist. How does that change Cochrane's work? Does he still make that leap, or does humanity spend the next 60 years trying to find us instead of developing their own technology? You're assuming the timeline you know is the only correct timeline, Guinan said. But what if it isn't? What if the history you learned in school was already written with this intervention included? Picard looked up sharply. A predestination paradox. You're suggesting we were always here. I'm suggesting that time is more complicated than before and after. Guinan leaned forward. Captain, I've lived a long time. I've seen civilizations rise and fall. And I can tell you that the Federation you know, the one built on principles of exploration and cooperation, exists because of who humanity is, not when they meet their first alien species. Those qualities were already there in 1996. You just reminded them. By violating regulations designed to protect the timeline. Regulations written by people who've never had to watch billions die when they could prevent it. Guinan's voice carried gentle firmness. You made a choice, Jean-Luc. Now you have to live with it and see where it leads. The ready room door chimed again. Enter. Riker stepped in, his expression grave. Captain, we have a situation. Earth's governments have coordinated a joint transmission. They're demanding we respond. And sir, he paused. They've activated nuclear weapons. They're not targeting us, yet, but they want assurances we're not a threat. Picard stood. Of course they do. From their perspective, we could be just another invasion force. What do you want to do? Picard looked at Guinan, who offered the slightest of nods. Then he straightened his uniform jacket and walked onto the bridge. The senior staff were at their stations, faces showing various degrees of concern. Data was monitoring Earth's communication networks. Worf was tracking their military deployments. Troy was sensing the roiling emotions of 6 billion people trying to process an impossible day. Mr. Data, Picard said, open a channel. All frequencies. I want every radio, every television, every communication device on Earth to receive this. Channel open, Captain. You are broadcasting to the entire planet. Picard took a breath. He was about to address humanity at its most vulnerable moment, exhausted from battle, traumatized by invasion, terrified of the unknown. The words he chose would shape how an entire civilization viewed the universe. People of Earth, Picard began, his voice calm and measured. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. First, let me assure you that we mean you no harm. We are not invaders. We are explorers who found ourselves in your time period due to circumstances beyond our control, and who could not stand by while your civilization faced extinction. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You have questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Why did we help you? The answers are complex, but I will give you what I can. We come from your future, approximately 370 years from now. In our time, Earth is part of a vast alliance called the United Federation of Planets, a union of over 150 worlds dedicated to peaceful exploration and mutual cooperation. Humanity not only survives this day, but thrives. You reach for the stars and take your place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. On the view screen, Data displayed real-time feeds of the broadcast's reception. Picard watched crowds gathering in public squares, families huddled around televisions, survivors in refugee camps listening on portable radios. The entire planet had stopped to listen. I know this is overwhelming, Picard continued. You have just fought the greatest battle in your history. You have lost millions of people. Your cities lie in ruins. And now you discover that the universe is far larger and stranger than you imagined. But I want you to understand something crucial. You won this war. Not us. We provided assistance, yes, but the victory was yours. Your courage, your ingenuity, your refusal to surrender in the face of extinction, that is what saved Earth today. That spirit is what makes humanity extraordinary, and it is what will carry you to the stars. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. There are rules we are supposed to follow, protocols about interaction with civilizations that have not yet developed faster-than-light travel. We have broken those rules by revealing ourselves to you. I do not know what consequences that will bring. But I do know this, I will not apologize for saving your world. And I believe that humanity is strong enough to handle the truth, that you are not alone in the universe, and that your future is brighter than you can possibly imagine. Picard's voice strengthened with conviction. In the coming days, you will rebuild. You will mourn your dead and tend your wounded. You will have many questions about what happened today and what it means for your future. I cannot answer all of those questions. There are limits to what I can tell you without potentially changing the timeline that leads to the Federation. But I can tell you this, do not fear the stars. Do not let this invasion make you suspicious of all alien life. What attacked you today was one species driven by hunger and conquest. They do not represent the galaxy as a whole. There are wonders waiting for you among the stars. Civilizations built on peace, exploration, and the belief that infinite diversity and infinite combinations makes us all stronger. He drew himself up, and his voice took on a note of gentle but firm authority. Continue to explore. Continue to reach beyond your world. In 67 years, you will achieve faster-than-light travel. When you do, you will send a signal into the universe, and you will be answered. A species called the Vulcans will make first contact with you, and that will begin Earth's true journey among the stars. What happens between now and then is up to you. But know that your future is glorious, and that the Federation I serve exists because of the strength and character you have demonstrated today. Picard paused once more, then concluded, we will remain in orbit for a short time to ensure no remaining hostile vessels threaten your planet. Then we must return to our own time. But before we go, I want to say this, it has been an honor to witness humanity at its finest hour. You faced the impossible and refused to surrender. You stood together when extinction threatened. That is the spirit that will one day unite your world and carry you to greatness. Remember this day not for the invasion you survived, but for the courage you showed. Live long and prosper, people of Earth. The stars are waiting for you. End transmission, Picard said quietly. The bridge was silent. Outside, Earth continued its rotation, and Picard imagined billions of people processing what they just heard, some with hope, others with fear, all of them changed by the knowledge that they weren't alone. Captain, Data said, I am receiving thousands of transmission requests. Government officials, military leaders, scientific organizations, religious authorities, they all wish to speak with you directly. Politely decline, Picard replied. Tell them we cannot provide additional information without risking further timeline contamination. Sir, Worf rumbled, several military installations are standing down their nuclear weapons. Others are maintaining alert status but are no longer actively targeting us. A cautious response, Picard acknowledged. Wise of them. Captain, Troy said softly, the emotional signature from Earth is shifting. The fear is still there, but it's being joined by something else. Hope. Wonder. A sense of possibility. Picard nodded, feeling some of the weight lift from his shoulders. Perhaps Guinan was right. Perhaps this was always meant to happen. Perhaps. Captain. Data's voice cut through with sharp urgency. I am detecting a massive subspace distortion forming 60,000 kilometers off our starboard bow. Configuration matches the temporal vortex that brought us here. It is expanding rapidly. The doorway home, Riker said. Not just a doorway, Data corrected. Captain, I am reading temporal enforcement vessels emerging from the vortex. Specifically, 3 Starfleet Temporal Integrity Commission ships, Galaxy-class configuration. They are hailing us. Picard felt his stomach sink. The Department of Temporal Investigations had found them. And judging by the fact that they'd sent 3 Galaxy-class starships, they were not pleased. On screen. The view screen shifted to show a severe-looking human woman in a Starfleet uniform, her collar pips indicating the rank of captain. Behind her, Picard could see the bridge of a Galaxy-class ship, his ship's sister class, but the equipment looked slightly different, suggesting modifications for temporal operations. Captain Picard, the woman said, her voice clipped and professional. I am Captain Rachel Garrett of the Temporal Integrity Commission ship Enterprise C. You are hereby ordered to stand down all systems and prepare to be taken into custody for multiple violations of the Temporal Prime Directive, unauthorized interference in pre-warp civilization development, and creation of a Class 7 temporal paradox. Picard straightened his shoulders. Captain Garrett, I understand your concerns, but... You understand nothing, Captain, Garrett cut him off. Do you have any idea what you've done? First contact with Earth wasn't supposed to happen until 2063. The social, technological, and political developments between 1996 and that date are foundational to the Federation you claim to serve. By revealing yourself, you have created a temporal split that threatens to erase 4 centuries of history. I saved 6 billion lives, Picard said quietly. You may have doomed 60 billion more, Garrett shot back. Captain Picard, you are not qualified to make decisions about timeline integrity. That's why the Temporal Prime Directive exists. That's why the Temporal Integrity Commission was created. You are a starship captain, not a temporal mechanic. And your good intentions may have just unraveled the fabric of the timeline. With respect, Captain, I would make the same choice again. Garrett's expression hardened. Then you will face the consequences of that choice. Stand down your weapons and prepare to surrender command of the Enterprise D. You and your senior staff will be transported to the Enterprise C for temporal debriefing and court-martial proceedings. Picard looked at his crew. Riker's hand had moved closer to the tactical controls. Worf was watching the TIC ships with the eyes of a warrior evaluating threats. Data was already running probability calculations. Troy was projecting calm despite the turmoil he knew she was sensing from everyone. They would follow him. If he gave the order to resist, they would fight 3 Galaxy-class starships to prevent his arrest. They would risk everything because they believed in him. Which was exactly why he couldn't ask them to. Stand down, Picard said quietly. All hands, this is the captain. Secure all weapons systems and prepare for Temporal Integrity Commission boarding. Captain, Riker began. That's an order, number 1. Picard's voice carried finality. We knew there would be consequences for our actions. Now we face them. He turned back to the view screen, meeting Captain Garrett's stern gaze. Captain, I will surrender myself and my senior staff as requested. But I have one condition. You are not in a position to negotiate, Captain Picard. Nevertheless, the Enterprise D is damaged. We have casualties. My crew had no choice in the decisions I made. I gave the orders that violated the Temporal Prime Directive. Allow them to make repairs and tend to their wounded before you confine them. They deserve that much. Garrett studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded curtly. Agreed. You have 12 hours to complete repairs and attend to your casualties. Then you will surrender command and transport to the Enterprise C for temporal processing. Garrett out. The screen went dark. Picard stood in the silence of his bridge, feeling the weight of command settle over him like a shroud. He had saved Earth. He had violated the most sacred directive in Starfleet temporal operations. And now he would face the judgment of those who understood better than he did what his actions might cost. Number 1, Picard said quietly, you have the bridge. See to the repairs and the casualties. I'll be in my ready room. He walked away from the command chair, away from the crew who had trusted him, toward an uncertain future he had created with his own choices. Behind him, Earth rotated into daylight, unaware that the man who had saved them now faced charges that could end his career and possibly his freedom. The timeline he knew was unraveling. And Jean-Luc Picard could only wait to see what new future would emerge from the ashes of the old. The 12 hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Engineering teams worked around the clock to repair hull breaches and restore the damaged tractor emitters. Medical teams tended to the wounded while Crusher personally oversaw the preparation of Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz for burial. The Enterprise's crew moved with practiced efficiency, but Picard could feel the tension underlying every action. The knowledge that their captain would soon be taken into custody, that their mission had ended in court-martial proceedings rather than triumph. Picard spent most of those hours in his ready room, preparing his testimony and reviewing temporal mechanics regulations he'd violated. The list was extensive. Unauthorized interference in pre-warp civilization development, revelation of future historical events, direct contact with pre-warp species, alteration of protected historical timeline, use of advanced technology in view of primitive populations. Each violation carried severe penalties. Combined, they could mean the end of his career, or worse. He'd sent a personal message to each crew member who would face charges alongside him: Riker, Data, Worf, LaForge, Crusher, and Troy. He'd made it clear that he took full responsibility, that their actions had been following his orders, that he would testify to their lack of choice in the matter. None of them had responded, which told him everything he needed to know about their loyalty and their refusal to let him shoulder the blame alone. With 1 hour remaining, Picard stood at his ready room window, looking down at Earth. The planet showed no visible scars from this distance, the burning cities were too small to see, the debris fields in the Atlantic hidden beneath cloud cover. From here, it looked peaceful. Innocent. Saved. The door chimed. Come. Guinan entered, and this time she did carry 2 glasses and a bottle. I thought you might want company for your last hour as captain. Picard accepted the glass gratefully. Is that what this is? My last hour? That depends on what Captain Garrett finds when she examines the timeline. Guinan poured for both of them. And on whether you can convince the Temporal Integrity Commission that you made the right choice. Can I? Picard took a drink, letting the burn of the alcohol ground him. Guinan, be honest with me. Did I destroy the timeline? Will everything that led to the Federation simply cease to exist because I couldn't watch Earth burn? Guinan was quiet for a long moment, swirling the liquid in her glass. You want me to tell you that everything will be fine, that the timeline is stable, that the Federation you know will continue unchanged? Yes. I can't do that. Guinan met his eyes. But I can tell you this, I remember the day first contact happened, the real first contact, in 2063. I was there, Jean-Luc. I watched Zephram Cochrane shake hands with a Vulcan for the first time. And you want to know what I remember most? What? Cochrane was drunk. He'd just broken the warp barrier, and instead of being awed and humbled, he was drunk and trying to figure out how to profit from the situation. He wasn't the noble pioneer history remembers. He was a flawed human being who stumbled into greatness. Guinan smiled faintly. My point is that history isn't as neat and predetermined as we like to think. Things happen in messy, complicated ways. And somehow, despite all the chaos and imperfection, we end up where we're meant to be. That's not very reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be true. Guinan raised her glass. To messy, complicated choices that might save the world or doom it. And to captains brave enough to make them anyway. Picard touched his glass to hers. To consequences, whatever they may be. They drank in companionable silence until Picard's combadge chirped. Bridge to Captain Picard. Sir, the Temporal Integrity Commission ships are hailing. They're ready to begin the transfer. Picard set down his glass and straightened his uniform. Acknowledged. I'm on my way. He looked at Guinan. Thank you for the drink. And the wisdom. One last piece of wisdom, Jean-Luc. Guinan stood, her ancient eyes holding his. Don't apologize for what you did. Don't show them regret. The Temporal Integrity Commission needs to see that you made a deliberate choice based on principles, not a panicked mistake. Show them the captain who saved Earth, not a man seeking forgiveness. Picard nodded slowly. Then he walked onto his bridge for what might be the last time. The senior staff were assembled, all of them in dress uniforms, all standing at attention. The view screen showed the 3 TIC ships holding position, their sleek forms a reminder that Starfleet's Temporal Enforcement Division had resources that matched their authority. Captain on the bridge, Worf announced formally. At ease. Picard moved to his command chair but didn't sit. Instead, he turned to face his crew. Before we proceed, I want to say something. What happened in the past 12 hours was my responsibility. I gave the orders. I made the choice to intervene. Each of you followed those orders because you are Starfleet officers who trust their captain. That trust is not misplaced, but neither should it result in your punishment for my decisions. Captain, Riker interrupted, with respect, we all knew what we were doing. Every order you gave, we could have refused. We didn't. That makes us just as responsible. Number 1. Sir, I'm not going to stand here and let you fall on your sword for all of us. Riker's voice was firm. We're in this together. We face the consequences together. Around the bridge, nods of agreement. Even Data, who technically couldn't be court-martialed as an android, stood with quiet solidarity. Picard felt emotion tighten his throat. Then we will face them with dignity and honor. Mr. Data, open a channel to Captain Garrett. Channel open, sir. Captain Garrett appeared on the view screen, her expression no less severe than before. Captain Picard. Are you prepared to surrender command and transport to the Enterprise C? We are, Captain. However, I would like to request one final action before we do. Garrett's eyes narrowed. What kind of action? My crew members Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz were killed during our engagement with the alien vessels. Starfleet protocol requires that we honor their sacrifice. I request permission to conduct a brief memorial service before we transport. For the first time, Garrett's stern expression softened fractionally. Permission granted, Captain. You have 30 minutes. Thank you. Picard out. The memorial was held in the ship's main shuttle bay, with the entire crew assembled. 2 photon torpedo casings rested on platforms, draped with the Federation flag. Inside each casing was a body. Lieutenant Chen, who'd been caught in a plasma fire while trying to route power to the shields, and Ensign Markowitz, who died when the hull breach on Deck 12 explosive decompressed his section before force fields could engage. Picard stood before the assembled crew, looking at faces he'd served with for years. Some were crying quietly. Others stood at rigid attention, grief held carefully in check. All of them were his responsibility. We are gathered here today, Picard began, his voice carrying through the shuttle bay, to honor 2 officers who gave their lives in service to Starfleet's highest ideals. Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz did not die in our time, in our space. They died defending a planet that existed 300 years before they were born, saving people they would never meet, because they believed in something larger than themselves. He paused, letting his gaze move across the assembled crew. Some will say they died because I made the wrong choice. That I should have obeyed the Temporal Prime Directive and let history unfold without interference. Perhaps they're right. But I want you all to know this, Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz knew what they were doing. They understood the risks. And in their final moments, they were performing their duties with the same dedication and courage they showed every day aboard this ship. Picard's voice strengthened. The Starfleet I know, the Starfleet that exists because Earth survives to create it, was built by people who refused to stand aside when others were in danger. That principle is not negotiable. It doesn't come with asterisks or exceptions. And these 2 officers embodied that principle completely. They died so that billions could live. There is no greater honor, and no greater sacrifice. He looked at the torpedo casings, at the flags that would soon tumble into space with their precious cargo. Lieutenant Chen joined Starfleet because her grandmother survived the Borg attack at Wolf 359. She wanted to ensure no one else lost family to forces they couldn't fight. Ensign Markowitz joined because he believed exploration was humanity's destiny, and he wanted to be part of discovering what waited beyond the next star. They both achieved their goals. They protected the innocent. They ensured humanity's future. They died as Starfleet officers, and they will be remembered as heroes. Picard stepped back, coming to attention. Crew, attention. 400 officers snapped to rigid attention as one. Present, arms. The honor guard raised their phasers in salute. Picard touched his comm badge. Computer, open shuttle bay doors. The massive doors began to slide open, revealing the starfield beyond. Earth hung in the distance, beautiful and blue and saved. Fire. The honor guard fired 3 volleys into space, the phaser beam streaking out into the void like ribbons of light. Launch torpedoes. The 2 casings were ejected from the Enterprise, tumbling gently into space where they would eventually be pulled into Earth's gravity well and burn up in the atmosphere, ashes scattered over the planet they died defending. Crew, dismissed. The assembly began to disperse, but Picard remained, watching the torpedo casings disappear into the distance. He felt Riker move up beside him. "They would have been proud to serve with you, Captain," Riker said quietly. "And I with them." Picard's voice was rough. "Number 1, if the Temporal Integrity Commission decides to remove me from command permanently. They won't. But if they do, the Enterprise will be in good hands with you." Riker looked at him sharply. "Sir, don't talk like you're going to lose your command. We don't know what's going to happen yet." "No, we don't. But I need you to be prepared for any outcome." Picard turned to face his first officer. "You're ready, Will. You've been ready for years. Don't let my mistakes hold you back from the captain's chair." Before Riker could respond, Worf's voice came over the comm bridge to Captain Picard. "The Temporal Integrity Commission is hailing. They are ready to proceed with the transfer." Picard took one last look at Earth, then turned toward the shuttle bay exit. "Acknowledged. I'm on my way." Minutes later, Picard and his senior staff stood in Transporter Room 3, preparing for transport to the Enterprise C. LaForge had been ordered to remain aboard to oversee final repairs, but the rest of the command crew would accompany Picard for questioning. Chief O'Brien stood at the transporter controls, his expression carefully neutral though Picard could see the concern in his eyes. "Energize when ready, Chief," Picard said. O'Brien's hands moved across the console, and the familiar hum of the transporter filled the room. Picard felt the tingle of the beam beginning to take hold, felt himself start to dematerialize. The transporter stuttered. The beam cut out abruptly, and Picard rematerialized on the pad with a jarring sensation that made his stomach lurch. "What happened?" Riker demanded. O'Brien's hands flew across his console, his expression shifting from concern to alarm. "I don't know, sir. Something interfered with the beam. I'm reading massive subspace distortions forming around the ship. It's like..." "Captain." Data's voice came urgently over the comm, "Report to the bridge immediately. We are detecting a temporal anomaly of unprecedented magnitude forming directly ahead of the Enterprise. The temporal vortex that brought us here is collapsing, and the resulting subspace shockwave." The ship lurched violently, throwing everyone against the transporter room walls. Red alert klaxons began to wail. "All hands, brace for impact." Picard heard Worf's voice over the ship-wide comm. Picard pulled himself to his feet and ran for the bridge, his senior staff close behind. They burst onto the bridge to find organized chaos, officers working frantically at their stations while the viewscreen showed something impossible. The temporal vortex was collapsing in on itself, creating a massive subspace implosion that was pulling everything nearby toward it. The 3 Temporal Integrity Commission ships were fighting to break free, their engines flaring at maximum as they struggled against the gravitational forces. And beyond them, space itself seemed to be tearing apart, revealing glimpses of other timelines, other realities, other possibilities. "Report." Picard commanded, taking his seat. "The temporal vortex is experiencing catastrophic destabilization," Data reported, his fingers dancing across his console. "The subspace fabric is fracturing. I am reading temporal incursions from multiple alternate timelines. Captain, whatever anchored this vortex to our timeline is failing. Can we escape?" "Unknown, sir. The gravitational forces are immense. Even at maximum warp, we may not be able to. A brilliant flash of light erupted from the collapsing vortex. When it cleared, something new had appeared in space between the Enterprise and the TIC ships. A massive structure, artificial, elegant, impossible. It hung in the void like a work of art, all flowing curves and energy fields that pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist in normal spacetime. What is that? Riker breathed. Data's voice carried a note of awe that Picard had rarely heard from the android. Captain, that is a temporal causality station. A structure built by the most advanced temporal mechanics to stabilize paradoxes and maintain timeline integrity. I have only seen references to such technology in the most classified temporal investigation files. They are not supposed to exist in our century. The structure began to glow, energy building along its surfaces. And then, from its center, a transmission came through, not on radio or subspace, but directly into the minds of everyone on both ships. A single word, spoken in a voice that seemed to echo from beyond time itself. Analysis complete. Picard gripped his armrests, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Whatever was about to happen would determine not just his fate, but possibly the fate of the entire timeline. The temporal causality station's light grew brighter, preparing to deliver its verdict on Captain Jean-Luc Picard's impossible choice. The temporal causality station pulsed with light that seemed to exist in dimensions human eyes weren't meant to perceive. Picard watched it on the view screen, feeling a strange pressure in his mind. Not painful, but present, as if something vast and incomprehensible was examining every thought, every decision, every moment that had led to this instant. Captain, Data said, his voice carrying unusual strain, the station is conducting a comprehensive temporal analysis. I am detecting chronometric radiation scanning not just our ship, but Earth itself. It is examining the entire timeline from the point of our arrival to the present moment, analyzing billions of causal pathways and probability matrices. It's looking for changes, Troy said, her hands pressed to her temples. I can feel it, not emotionally, but, it's searching through time itself, comparing what happened to what should have happened. On the view screen, Captain Garrett's face appeared, split screen with the temporal causality station. Her stern expression had been replaced by something closer to shock. Captain Picard, are you seeing this? Indeed, Captain Garrett. What exactly is happening? The station is a failsafe, Garrett replied, her voice tight. When the Temporal Integrity Commission was formed, we discovered certain, automated systems built by species far more advanced than the Federation. They exist outside normal time, monitoring paradoxes and timeline corruption. This is the first time I've ever seen one activate. And what does it do when it activates? Garrett's pause was telling. It judges. It determines whether a temporal violation is acceptable or catastrophic. And then she hesitated. It corrects. One way or another. And what does it do when it activates? Garrett's pause was telling. It judges. It determines whether a temporal violation is acceptable or catastrophic. And then she hesitated. It corrects. One way or another. The pressure in Picard's mind intensified. He felt the station's consciousness, if that was the right word, examining not just his actions but his intentions. Why had he intervened? What principles had guided his choices? What futures had he created or destroyed? The voice came again, resonating through every neural pathway. Timeline variance, detected. Analyzing divergence points. On the view screen, images began to appear, not from their sensors, but projected directly from the station. Picard watched himself giving the order to hide behind the moon. Watched the transporter malfunctions that helped the insertion team. Watched the Enterprise engage the city destroyers. Watched himself broadcast to all of Earth. Each moment was analyzed, broken down into probability cascades and causal chains that spiraled out across decades. Divergence. Point 1. Enterprise intervention increases Earth survival probability from 34.7% to 87.3%. Acceptable variance. Divergence. Point 2. Direct communication with pre-warp civilization. Temporal contamination, severe. Analyzing downstream effects. The images shifted, showing possible futures. In sum, Picard saw Earth developing faster than light travel within 20 years, humanity reaching for the stars with desperate hunger. In others, he saw religious schisms and wars as civilization struggled to process the revelation that they weren't alone. In others still, he saw Earth united by the common knowledge of a greater universe, building towards something beautiful. Captain, Data said urgently, the station is running predictive models. It is calculating whether the timeline we know can still exist given the changes we have made. And? Picard demanded. The calculations are extremely complex, sir. There are billions of variables. The probability matrices are. Data stopped abruptly. Captain, the station has reached a conclusion. The light from the temporal causality station coalesced into a single brilliant point. The pressure in Picard's mind reached a crescendo, and then. Judgment, timeline paradox detected. Enterprise intervention was always part of original timeline. No correction required. Silence on the bridge. Picard stared at the view screen, processing what he'd just heard. Captain Garrett, Picard said carefully, did that mean what I think it meant? Garrett's face on the screen showed the same confusion he felt. It's saying, you were always here. That your intervention in 1996 was part of the original timeline, not a deviation from it. A predestination paradox, Data confirmed, excitement creeping into his voice. Captain, the station is indicating that the timeline we know, the one that leads to the Federation, exists because we intervened in 1996, not despite it. We were always meant to be here. The temporal causality station's voice echoed once more. Additional analysis, Zephram Cochrane breaks warp barrier April 5, 2063. First contact with Vulcans occurs as scheduled. Federation formation proceeds normally. Timeline integrity, maintained. But how? Riker demanded. We told them about the future. We showed them advanced technology. How does that not change everything? Data's fingers flew across his console, accessing data that the station was now broadcasting. Commander, I am receiving historical records from the station's database. They show. Captain, they show that Earth's governments classified everything about our intervention. Within weeks of the invasion's end, all evidence of the Enterprise was suppressed. Official records attributed the alien defeat entirely to human resistance efforts. The few videos and testimonials that existed were dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications. A cover-up, Crusher said. They hid the truth. Not just hid it, Data continued, scanning the data. According to these records, a secret international coalition formed in the wake of the invasion, a group dedicated to preparing humanity for eventual contact with alien species while maintaining the fiction that we were alone. They used knowledge of the Enterprise's existence to quietly advance certain technologies, to foster international cooperation, to prepare Earth for first contact when it would eventually occur in 2063. Picard leaned forward. They knew. Earth's leaders knew that contact was coming, knew that humanity's future lay in the stars. But they kept it secret to prevent panic and allow civilization to develop naturally. Precisely, sir. And when first contact did occur in 2063, humanity was psychologically prepared for it in ways they might not have been otherwise. The knowledge that the Enterprise had intervened in 1996 became a classified secret passed down through select governmental and scientific organizations. By the time the Federation was formed, the truth had been buried so deeply that even Starfleet Academy history courses don't mention it. Except, Worf rumbled, someone in Starfleet knew. Someone preserved the records in the Temporal Integrity Commission archives. Garrett's voice came from the view screen. That's correct, Lieutenant. The TIC has always known about the Enterprise DS intervention in 1996. We've been monitoring the timeline for any signs that it might fracture or change. But the Temporal Causality Station's judgment confirms what our analysis suggested. Your intervention was a stable time loop. You didn't change history, Captain Picard. You created it. The implications crashed over Picard like a wave. Everything he'd agonized over, every regulation he thought he'd violated, every consequence he'd feared. All of it had been predetermined. He hadn't destroyed the timeline. He'd been part of it from the beginning. Captain Garrett, Picard said slowly, does this mean we're no longer facing court-martial? Garrett's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but something less severe. It means, Captain, that you are facing a very different kind of proceeding. The Temporal Integrity Commission needs to debrief you and your crew extensively. We need to understand exactly what happened here so we can ensure the timeline remains stable. But as for charges, she paused. The station's judgment is clear. You acted as you were meant to act. There will be no court-martial. Relief flooded through Picard, so intense it was almost painful. Around the bridge, he saw his crew's rigid tension begin to ease. Riker actually laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief and joy. However, Garrett continued, her stern expression returning, there are still protocols to follow. You and your senior staff will need to transport to the Enterprise C for temporal debriefing. The process will take several days. And Captain, when you return to your own time, this entire incident will be classified at the highest levels. You will not be permitted to speak of it to anyone outside your immediate crew. Is that understood? Perfectly, Captain. Good. Then I suggest you. The Temporal Causality Station flared brilliant white, cutting off Garrett's words. The pressure in Picard's mind returned, but different now, gentler, almost communicative. Final dispensation, Earth has been saved. Timeline integrity confirmed. Enterprise D crew commended for maintaining causal loop. Returning subjects to original temporal coordinates in 5 minutes. Wait, Picard said sharply. We're being returned to our time. Now. Data checked his readings. Confirmed, Captain. The temporal vortex is stabilizing into a controlled transit corridor. The station is preparing to send us back to the exact moment we left, to the binary star system where this began. But the debriefing. Picard looked at Garrett's face on the screen. We'll have to wait, apparently, Garrett said, frustration evident in her voice. Captain Picard, the station's technology is beyond even TIC capabilities. If it's decided to return you to your proper time, we can't stop it. She straightened. I'll expect a full report transmitted through temporal communications the moment you arrive. And Captain, this conversation never happened. Do you understand? I understand, Captain Garrett. Good luck, Captain Picard. You're going to need it when you have to explain this to Admiral Nakamura. Garrett's image winked out, replaced by the view of the 3 TIC ships beginning to move away from the forming transit corridor. 4 minutes to transit, Data announced. The station is creating a stable pathway through time. Captain, this is remarkable, I am reading chronometric precision beyond anything I have ever encountered. The temporal displacement will be exact to the nanosecond. Picard stood, moving to the view screen. The Temporal Causality Station hung in space like a monument to mysteries humanity had yet to understand. Beyond it, Earth rotated peacefully, saved, but unaware of how close it had come to extinction. Or perhaps some people knew. Perhaps in classified files and secret meetings, Earth's leaders carried the knowledge forward, preparing humanity for the day when the stars would open to them. Captain, Troy said softly, may I say something? Of course, Counselor. What we did here mattered. I know the station says we were always part of the timeline, that it was predestined. But in the moment, when you made the choice to intervene, you didn't know that. You chose to save Earth because it was the right thing to do, consequences be damned. That choice, that willingness to sacrifice everything for others, that's what makes you a great captain. That's what makes this crew great. Picard felt warmth spread through his chest. Thank you, counselor. Though I suspect I'll be doing a great deal of explaining when we return. Somehow I doubt Admiral Nakamura will be satisfied with, the temporal causality station said it was fine. Light laughter rippled through the bridge, the release of tension that had been building for hours. 2 minutes to transit, Data announced. Picard returned to his command chair, settling into it with a sense of rightness. This was where he belonged. Not in a Temporal Integrity Commission brig, not defending himself at a court-martial, but here, on the bridge of the Enterprise, with his crew around him, facing whatever challenges the universe threw at them. Mr. Data, are we ready for transit? All systems optimal, Captain. The station's temporal corridor is stable. Transit will be smooth. Excellent. Mr. Worf, send a final message to Earth. All frequencies, like before. Worf looked up, surprised. Sir. Tell them. Picard paused, choosing his words carefully. Tell them that we are departing. Tell them that we will not forget this day, and we hope they won't either. Tell them that in 67 years, when they achieve faster-than-light travel, someone will be waiting to greet them. Tell them the future is theirs to build, and it will be glorious. Worf's fingers moved across the tactical console. Message sent, Captain. On the view screen, Picard watched Earth one last time. Down there, billions of people were picking up the pieces of their shattered world. They were burying their dead, rebuilding their cities, and trying to make sense of a universe that had just become infinitely larger and stranger. Some would spend their lives trying to find the Federation starship Enterprise again. Others would dismiss it as trauma-induced mass hallucination. But all of them, whether they knew it or not, would carry forward into a future that led inevitably to the stars. 30 seconds, Data counted down. The temporal causality station began to glow with impossible colors. The vortex opened before them, a swirling corridor through time and space that would carry them home. All hands, Picard announced ship-wide, this is the captain. In a few moments, we will return to our proper time. What we experienced here, what we did, what we witnessed, what we sacrificed, will become classified. But I want you all to know that I have never been more proud to serve with a crew. You faced impossible choices with courage and integrity. You saved 6 billion lives. And you proved that the principles we serve are not negotiable, no matter what century we're in. He paused, feeling the weight of command settle comfortably on his shoulders once more. When we arrive back at the binary star system, we will continue our scientific survey as if nothing happened. Our official logs will reflect only a brief temporal anomaly that we successfully navigated. But in our hearts, we will carry the knowledge that we made a difference. That we were there when Earth needed us most. And that the future we know exists because we had the courage to fight for it. 10 seconds, Data announced. 9. 8. 7. The Enterprise began to move forward, drawn into the temporal vortex by forces beyond conventional physics. 6. 5. 4. Picard gripped his armrests, watching the station grow brighter. 3. 2. 1. Engage, Picard said quietly. The Enterprise D plunged into the vortex, and time itself bent around her hull. For a brief, eternal moment, Picard existed across all moments simultaneously, saw the binary stars where they'd started, saw Earth burning beneath alien fire, saw the Enterprise engaging city destroyers, saw Cochrane breaking the warp barrier 67 years hence, saw the Federation forming and expanding and becoming the greatest alliance the galaxy had ever known. He saw the timeline, whole and complete and stable. A great tapestry woven from billions of choices, including his own. Then the moment passed, and the Enterprise emerged into normal space. The binary stars hung before them, exactly as they had when this all began. The stellar phenomena they'd been studying continued their slow, ancient dance. On Data's console, the chronometer showed they'd been gone for exactly 2.3 seconds, the precise duration of their passage through the temporal anomaly. "All hands, report," Picard ordered, falling back into routine. "All stations reporting normal, Captain," Worf confirmed. "Warp drive operational," LaForge's voice came from engineering. "No trace of chronometric radiation. Whatever sent us to 1996 cleaned up after itself." "Confirmed," Data added. "I am detecting no evidence of our temporal displacement. All ship systems show we experienced a brief subspace fluctuation lasting 2.3 seconds. Our sensor logs corroborate this." "Captain, it is as if the last 12 hours never happened." "Except they did happen," Riker said quietly. "We remember. All 400 of us remember. And 2 of us won't be going home," Crusher added, her voice heavy with the weight of Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz's deaths. Picard nodded slowly. "Number 1, note in the official log that we encountered a temporal anomaly while surveying the binary system. During the event, we suffered casualties from a spatial distortion. Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz died in the line of duty. Their sacrifice will be honored." "Aye, sir." "Captain," Troy said carefully, "how do we explain their deaths without explaining what really happened?" "We tell the truth, as much of it as we're permitted to tell. They died protecting this ship from forces we encountered during a temporal event." "That is accurate, if incomplete." Picard stood, straightening his uniform. "The rest will remain classified until such time as Starfleet Security and the Temporal Integrity Commission decide otherwise." He looked around at his bridge crew, at faces that had been with him through one of the most harrowing missions of his career, a mission that officially never happened. They had saved Earth. They had maintained the timeline. They had proven that the principles of the Federation were worth any sacrifice. And now they would go back to mapping stellar phenomena as if nothing had changed. Except everything had changed. They knew now that their choices mattered across centuries. They knew that sometimes the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same. They knew that 6 billion lives could hang on a captain's decision to violate regulations in service of a higher principle. "Mr. Data," Picard said, settling back into his command chair, "resume our survey of the binary system. Standard sensor sweeps. Let's finish what we came here to do." "Aye, Captain." Resuming survey operations. The Enterprise turned back to her work, her crew forever changed by a mission they could never discuss. And 374 years in the past, on a planet slowly recovering from invasion, a classified file was being created, a file that would be passed down through generations, carefully guarded, never acknowledged. A file that contained one simple truth. They were never alone. The Enterprise had been watching. And when the darkest hour came, strangers from the stars had intervened to ensure humanity survived long enough to join them. The future was secure. The timeline was stable. And Captain Jean-Luc Picard had proven that sometimes, the greatest act of temporal responsibility was knowing when to break the rules. 3 days had passed since the Enterprise returned to its proper time. 3 days of routine scientific surveys, standard crew rotations, and the careful normalcy that Picard knew his crew needed after the extraordinary events they'd experienced. The binary star system had yielded fascinating data on stellar evolution, though Picard suspected none of them would remember the survey for its scientific contributions. They would remember Earth burning. They would remember the choice. Picard sat in his ready room, reviewing the classified report he transmitted to Starfleet Command through temporal communications channels. The report was necessarily vague: temporal anomaly encountered, brief displacement to Earth's past, intervention required to prevent extinction-level event, timeline confirmed stable by temporal causality station. Admiral Nakamura's response had been terse: report to Starbase 234 for in-person debriefing upon completion of current mission. Temporal Integrity Commission representatives will be present. So there would be consequences after all. Perhaps not a court-martial, but certainly an accounting. Picard was prepared for that. Some choices were worth defending, no matter how many admirals questioned them. The door chimed. Come. Data entered, carrying a PADD. Captain, I have completed my analysis of the temporal causality station's data transmission. I thought you would want to see the results. Picard gestured to the chair across from him. Please, Mr. Data. What did you find? Data settled into the seat with his characteristic precise movements. The station provided us with a remarkable amount of information before returning us to our proper time. Most of it is encrypted beyond my current ability to decode, but I was able to extract several key pieces of historical data regarding Earth's development between 1996 and 2063. And the timeline proceeds exactly as our history records indicate, with one notable exception. Data called up information on the PADD. In our history books, the period between 1996 and first contact is described as chaotic, the eugenics wars, World War III, post-atomic horror, the gradual rebuilding that eventually led to Cochrane's warp flight. However, the station's data suggests that Earth's recovery from the 1996 invasion actually accelerated certain positive developments. Picard leaned forward, intrigued. In what way? The secret international coalition that formed after the invasion, referred to in classified documents as the Watchers, used knowledge of our intervention to quietly foster cooperation between nations. They couldn't reveal why cooperation was necessary without exposing the truth about the Enterprise, but they could encourage policies that would lead to eventual global unity. By the time World War III erupted in 2026, the Watchers had created enough international infrastructure that the post-war recovery was faster and more effective than it might otherwise have been. They used knowledge of us to prepare humanity for first contact, Picard said slowly. Without ever revealing that knowledge publicly. Correct, sir. And there is more. Data's golden eyes carried something that might have been excitement. According to the station's records, Zephram Cochrane was a member of the Watchers. His family had been saved during the 1996 invasion by the Enterprise's intervention. When he developed the warp drive in 2063, he did so knowing that faster-than-light travel would signal humanity's readiness for contact, because the Watchers had preserved records indicating that contact would occur when Earth achieved warp capability. Picard sat back, processing this. So Cochrane's warp flight wasn't just a scientific breakthrough. It was a deliberate signal to the universe that humanity was ready. Indeed, sir. The historical record we know, where Cochrane is portrayed as a reluctant hero who stumbled into greatness, is technically accurate. But the classified record shows he was also carrying forward a mission that began the day the Enterprise appeared over Earth in 1996. A stable time loop, Picard murmured. We saved Earth because Cochrane created the warp drive. Cochrane created the warp drive because we saved Earth. There's no beginning and no end, just an eternal cycle of cause and effect. That is the nature of predestination paradoxes, sir. They exist outside linear causality. Data tilted his head. Captain, I have been processing the philosophical implications of our experience. If our actions were always part of the timeline, did we truly have free will in our choices? Or were we simply fulfilling a predetermined script? It was a question Picard had been wrestling with himself. What do you think, Data? I believe both are true simultaneously, Data replied. From an external, atemporal perspective, our actions were predetermined, they had to occur for the timeline to remain stable. But from our subjective experience within time, we made genuine choices based on our principles and values. The predestination did not remove our agency, it simply meant that our freely chosen actions aligned with the timeline's requirements. In other words, we chose to do what we were always going to choose to do. Precisely, Captain. And I find that oddly reassuring. It suggests that the timeline is stable not because of cosmic compulsion, but because individuals like you consistently make choices aligned with the Federation's highest ideals. Picard felt a warmth spread through his chest at Data's words. Thank you, Data. That's a remarkably optimistic interpretation. I learned optimism from observing you, sir. Data stood. I will continue analyzing the station's data. If I discover anything further of significance, I will inform you immediately. After Data left, Picard sat in silence, contemplating the android's words. Then he tapped his comm badge. Picard to senior staff. Please report to the observation lounge. 10 minutes later, Picard sat at the head of the conference table, looking at the faces of the officers who had shared the burden of their impossible mission. Riker, Data, Worf, LaForge, Crusher, and Troy, all present, all waiting to hear what he had to say. I wanted to gather you all together, Picard began, because in 3 days we'll arrive at Starbase 234 for debriefing. Once we do, this matter will officially close. The Temporal Integrity Commission will review our actions, classify everything beyond top secret, and will be ordered never to speak of it again. Before that happens, I wanted to address what we experienced together. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Each of you followed my orders during the temporal displacement. You trusted my judgment when I chose to violate the Temporal Prime Directive. That trust is a gift I don't take lightly, and it carries a weight I want to acknowledge. Captain, Riker began, but Picard held up a hand. Let me finish, number 1. We lost 2 crew members during our intervention. Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz died because I chose to engage hostile vessels rather than maintain non-interference. Their deaths are on my conscience, and they should be. But I want you all to know that if faced with the same situation again, I would make the same choice. Because as Starfleet officers, we don't stand aside when billions of lives are at stake. Regardless of what century those lives exist in. We all made that choice, sir, Crusher said firmly. Not just you. Beverly's right, LaForge added. We all knew what we were doing. We all agreed that saving Earth was worth the risk. Worf nodded gravely. It was an honorable battle. Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz died as warriors, defending those who could not defend themselves. There is no greater death. And the timeline confirmed that we did the right thing, Troy added. Captain, the temporal causality station itself validated your choice. You weren't just following your instincts, you were fulfilling your role in a predestined loop that ensures the Federation's existence. Picard smiled faintly. Thank you all. Your support means more than you know. But I want to address something else, something that concerns me about what we learned from the station's data. He leaned forward, his expression serious. We now know that Earth's leaders covered up our intervention. They classified it, hid it, created an entire secret organization to manage the knowledge without revealing it publicly. From their perspective, that was probably the right choice. It prevented panic and allowed civilization to develop naturally. But it also means that for centuries, a small group of people knew the truth while the rest of humanity lived in ignorance. You're worried about the ethical implications of that secrecy, Data observed. I am. The Federation prides itself on transparency, on the free exchange of information and ideas. Yet our intervention created a situation where Earth's governments felt compelled to maintain a massive conspiracy lasting nearly 70 years. That troubles me. Riker leaned back in his chair, considering. But sir, wasn't that secrecy necessary? If Earth's population had known about us. If they'd known that warp-capable civilizations existed and were watching them, wouldn't that have fundamentally changed their development? Perhaps. Or perhaps it would have united them faster, driven them to achieve warp capability sooner, created a more prepared civilization for first contact. Picard shook his head. We can't know. The timeline we have is the timeline that was. But I wonder sometimes if we underestimate people's ability to handle the truth. In this case, Crusher said carefully, I think Earth's leaders made the right call. The planet was traumatized. Millions were dead. Cities were in ruins. Adding the revelation that they'd been saved by time travelers from a future federation would have been too much. People needed stability, not more existential chaos. And they got it, Troy added. The Watchers used their knowledge to foster cooperation without revealing why cooperation was necessary. They guided humanity toward a better future while allowing people to believe they were making their own choices. Which brings us back to Data's question about free will, Picard said. If the Watchers were manipulating events based on knowledge from the future, were the people they influenced truly making free choices? Or were they being guided down a predetermined path? The table fell silent as each officer contemplated the question. Finally, Worf spoke. Does it matter? The path led to the Federation. To Starfleet. To the principles we serve. If manipulation was required to reach that destination, perhaps the ends justified the means. I respectfully disagree, Lieutenant, Picard said. The ends never justify the means, not fully. The methods we use to achieve our goals matter as much as the goals themselves. That's why the Prime Directive exists. That's why we don't conquer civilizations to bring them the benefits of Federation membership, even when we're certain they would be better off. We believe in the right of species to develop their own path, to make their own mistakes, to find their own way to the stars. But you violated the Prime Directive to save Earth, LaForge pointed out. I did. And I stand by that choice. But that doesn't mean I'm comfortable with all the consequences that followed. The secrecy, the manipulation, the decades of hidden knowledge, those were necessary evils, perhaps, but they were still evils. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. Riker studied Picard thoughtfully. Captain, what are you really worried about here? Picard was quiet for a long moment. I'm worried that we've learned the wrong lesson from this experience. Yes, we saved Earth. Yes, the timeline confirmed our actions were correct. But I don't want anyone on this crew to walk away thinking that the ends always justify the means, or that we can violate our principles whenever we face a difficult choice. What happened with the temporal displacement was unique. A predestination paradox where a violation of the Temporal Prime Directive was actually required to maintain timeline integrity. That's not a precedent we should rely on. He looked around the table, meeting each officer's eyes. The next time we face an impossible choice, the temporal causality station won't appear to validate our decision. The timeline won't conveniently align with our intervention. We'll have to make our choice and live with the consequences, uncertain whether we're doing the right thing. And in those moments, I need you all to remember that our principles matter. That the Prime Directive exists for a reason. That we can't save everyone, and sometimes the most moral choice is to stand aside and let events unfold, no matter how painful that is. Even if billions die? Crusher asked quietly. Even then, Picard said, though the words cost him. Because if we abandon our principles every time we face a difficult situation, we become exactly what the Federation was created to oppose, a powerful force imposing our will on others because we believe we know better. Our strength must be tempered by restraint. Our capability must be balanced by wisdom. And sometimes, wisdom means accepting that we cannot save everyone. The observation lounge was silent. Picard could see his crew processing his words, wrestling with the same moral complexities he'd been struggling with for days. I understand what you're saying, sir, Riker said finally. But I don't regret what we did. And I don't think you should either. I don't regret saving Earth, number one. I regret that we had to violate our principles to do it. There's a difference. Perhaps, Troy said gently, the lesson here isn't about when to violate our principles, but about accepting that sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. You made the least terrible choice available to you. That's all any captain can do. Picard nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right, counselor. Perhaps that's the real wisdom. Not having all the answers, but being willing to make the hard choices and carry the weight of them afterward. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Thank you all for your candor. When we arrive at Starbase 234, I'll defend our actions to the Temporal Integrity Commission. I'll make it clear that you all were following my orders and should face no consequences for my decisions. But I also want you to think carefully about what we learned from this experience. Both the tactical lessons and the moral ones. The senior staff began to disperse, but Guinan's words from days ago echoed in Picard's mind. Some burdens don't get lighter with time, they just become part of who you are. He was carrying a new burden now. The knowledge that he had saved 6 billion lives by violating the most sacred directive in temporal operations. The knowledge that 2 of his crew had died in the process. The knowledge that he would make the same choice again if faced with the same situation. And the knowledge that such certainty was perhaps the most dangerous thing a captain could possess. Later that evening, Picard stood alone on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The binary system had finally been fully surveyed, and they would depart for Starbase 234 in the morning. Somewhere out there, 374 years in the past, Earth was rebuilding. The Watchers were forming. Humanity was beginning the long, painful journey toward the stars. And 67 years from that moment, Zephram Cochrane would break the warp barrier, knowing that someone would be waiting to greet him. The door opened behind him. Picard didn't need to turn to know it was Guinan. Couldn't sleep, she asked, moving to stand beside him. Too much on my mind. The debriefing? Among other things. Picard was quiet for a moment. Guinan, do you think I did the right thing? I think you did the only thing you could do and still be Jean-Luc Picard. That's not an answer. It's the only answer that matters. Guinan looked out at the stars. You know, I've been thinking about what the Temporal Causality Station said. That you were always part of the timeline, that your intervention was predetermined. Do you know what that tells me? What? That the universe has better judgment than most admirals. It knew exactly who to send back to 1996. It knew that when faced with an impossible choice, you would choose saving lives over following regulations. And it made sure you were there when Earth needed someone like you. Picard smiled faintly. You're suggesting the universe has agency? I'm suggesting that sometimes, things happen for a reason. Not because of destiny or fate, but because the right person is in the right place at the right time. You were the right person, Jean-Luc. And Earth is still here because of it. When you stand before the Temporal Integrity Commission, don't give them justifications or rationalizations. Give them the truth. Tell them you saw billions of people about to die, and you couldn't stand by and watch. Tell them you violated the Temporal Prime Directive because sometimes, the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same thing. Tell them that if being a Starfleet captain means following regulations while people die, then maybe the regulations need to be reconsidered. Picard looked at her sharply. That's a rather radical position. You committed a rather radical act. Guinan met his eyes. Stand by it, Jean-Luc. Don't apologize. Don't equivocate. Stand by the choice you made and let them deal with the consequences of that conviction. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Not many captains would have had the courage to do what you did. After she left, Picard remained on the observation deck for another hour, thinking about courage and conviction, about principles and pragmatism, about the weight of command and the price of conscience. He had saved Earth. He had violated the Temporal Prime Directive. He had lost 2 crew members. He had maintained the timeline. He had made choices that would echo across centuries. And when he stood before the Temporal Integrity Commission in 3 days, he would do exactly as Guinan suggested. He would tell them the truth. He would defend his actions. And he would let them decide whether saving 6 billion lives was worth the regulations he'd broken. Because in the end, that was what command meant. Making the hard choices, carrying the weight of them, and standing firm in the conviction that some principles transcended regulations. The Prime Directive was sacred. Life was sacred. And sometimes, a captain had to choose which sacredness mattered more. Picard touched the viewport, his fingers resting against the transparent aluminum that separated him from the vacuum of space. Out there, across vast distances of time and space, Earth existed, past, present, and future simultaneously. A planet that had been saved by strangers from the stars who revealed themselves too soon and exactly when they were meant to. Live long and prosper, Picard whispered to the Earth that was and the Earth that would be. Then he turned from the viewport and walked back toward his quarters, ready to face whatever judgment awaited him at Starbase 234, secure in the knowledge that he had done what any Starfleet captain worth the rank would do. He had saved those who needed saving. And he would never apologize for that. The Enterprise D approached Starbase 234 3 days later, her hull gleaming against the backdrop of stars. In the main shuttle bay, a memorial service had just concluded, a final honoring of Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz before their families would receive the carefully worded notifications of their deaths during a classified temporal incident. The crew had stood in solemn ranks, remembering two officers who had given their lives defending a planet centuries in the past, a sacrifice that could never be publicly acknowledged. Now, as the starbase grew larger on the view screen, Picard stood on his bridge for what might be the last time as captain of the Enterprise. The Temporal Integrity Commission's representatives were waiting in one of the starbase's classified briefing rooms. Admiral Nakamura had transmitted ahead. The debriefing would be thorough, the questions pointed, and the consequences uncertain. But Picard felt a strange calm. He had wrestled with doubt and second-guessing for 3 days, examining his choices from every angle, questioning his judgment, wondering if he'd destroyed more than he'd saved. And at the end of that exhaustive analysis, he'd arrived at a simple truth: he would make the same choice again. Every time. Without hesitation. Some things were worth more than regulations. Some principles transcended directives. And saving 6 billion lives was one of them. Captain, data reported from Ops, we are being hailed by Starbase 234. They are requesting you transport directly to Briefing Room 7 upon arrival. Acknowledged. Picard stood, straightening his uniform jacket with a gesture that had become automatic over the years. Number 1, you have the con. Oversee the resupply and repair operations. I don't know how long this debriefing will take. Riker stood, extending his hand. Good luck, Captain. Give them hell. Picard shook his first officer's hand, then looked around his bridge, at Data monitoring the approach vectors, at Worf maintaining security protocols, at Troy offering a supportive smile, at the junior officers working their stations with quiet efficiency. This crew had followed him through an impossible mission. They deserved better than to watch their captain face judgment alone. Mr. Data, Mr. Worf, Counselor Troy, Picard said. You'll accompany me to the debriefing. The rest of the senior staff is to remain aboard and see to the ship's needs. In Transporter Room 3, Chief O'Brien worked the controls with his usual precision. Coordinates locked in, Captain. Briefing Room 7 on Starbase 234. Energize when ready. Thank you, Chief. Picard stepped onto the transporter pad, his 3 officers joining him. Energize. The familiar tingle of the transporter beam took hold, and the Enterprise dissolved around them. When it resolved, they stood in a Spartan briefing room dominated by a large conference table. Seated on one side were Captain Rachel Garrett of the Enterprise C, 2 other Temporal Integrity Commission officers Picard didn't recognize, and Admiral Nakamura, his expression carefully neutral but his eyes sharp with assessment. Captain Picard, Nakamura said without preamble. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. The debriefing lasted 4 hours. Picard recounted every detail of the temporal displacement, the Chronoton vortex, the arrival above Earth on July 2, 1996, the decision tree that led to intervention, the engagement with the city destroyers, the broadcast to Earth's population, and finally the temporal causality station's judgment that their actions had been part of the original timeline. The TIC officers asked questions with surgical precision. Why didn't you attempt to escape the temporal vortex before it fully formed? What protocols did you follow for temporal contamination assessment? At what point did you decide the Temporal Prime Directive was negotiable? How do you justify revealing advanced technology to a pre-warp civilization? Picard answered each question honestly, refusing to minimize his choices or hide behind technicalities. Yes, he had violated the Temporal Prime Directive. Yes, he had made first contact with Earth 67 years early. Yes, he had engaged in combat that was witnessed by billions. And yes, he would do it all again. Admiral Nakamura listened without interruption until the TIC officers had exhausted their questions. Then he leaned forward, his dark eyes fixing on Picard. Captain, I've reviewed the classified data from the temporal causality station. I've read your report. I've analyzed the timeline integrity assessments. And I have one question that supersedes all the others. Do you believe you had the right to make the choice you made? Picard met his admiral's gaze steadily. No, sir, I don't. Surprise flickered across Nakamura's face. No. No, Admiral. I don't believe I had the right to decide the fate of 6 billion people by choosing to intervene. But I also don't believe I had the right to decide their fate by choosing to stand aside and let them die. The moment the Enterprise was pulled into that temporal vortex, I lost the luxury of clean hands. Any choice I made, intervention or non-intervention, was an exercise of power over people who never asked for my involvement. Picard's voice strengthened. What I do believe is that I had a responsibility. As a Starfleet officer. As a human being. As someone with the capability to prevent mass extinction. I had a responsibility to make the best choice I could with the information available to me. And the best choice, given that billions of lives hung in the balance, was to violate regulations designed to protect the timeline, a timeline that, it turned out, required my violation to exist in the first place. That circular reasoning, Captain, one of the TIC officers interjected. You can't justify violating the Temporal Prime Directive by claiming your violation was predestined. I'm not claiming predestination justifies my choice, Picard countered. I'm saying my choice was justified on its own merits, saving billions of lives from extinction. The fact that the timeline validated that choice is merely confirmation after the fact, not justification before it. When I gave the order to engage those city destroyers, I didn't know we were part of a stable time loop. I made the choice believing I might be destroying the entire timeline. And I made it anyway, because I determined that the certain death of 6 billion people outweighed the uncertain destruction of the timeline. That's an extraordinary standard, Captain, Nakamura said carefully. If every Starfleet officer made similar calculations when encountering temporal anomalies. They shouldn't, Picard interrupted. Admiral, I'm not arguing for a general relaxation of the Temporal Prime Directive. I'm not suggesting that every captain should feel free to intervene in historical events when they judge it necessary. What I'm saying is that regulations are guidelines for decision-making, not substitutes for judgment. In the vast majority of cases, the Temporal Prime Directive provides the correct guidance. But in extreme circumstances, true extinction-level events where non-intervention guarantees the death of billions, I believe a captain must weigh competing moral imperatives and make the best choice they can. Captain Garrett spoke for the first time since the interrogation began. And if that choice is wrong? If you misjudge the situation and create a timeline collapse? Then I would bear that responsibility and its consequences, Picard said simply. Command is not about making easy choices or risk-free decisions. It's about accepting the weight of judgment and living with the outcomes. I made my choice. The timeline validated it. But even if it hadn't, Even if my intervention had created a paradox that unraveled centuries of history, I would still defend the choice on the grounds that I acted on the best information available with the moral principles that define Starfleet. The room fell silent. The TIC officers exchanged glances. Admiral Nakamura leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Finally, Garrett spoke. Captain Picard, the Temporal Integrity Commission has reviewed all available evidence. The Temporal Causality Station's judgment is definitive. Your intervention was part of the stable timeline, not a deviation from it. From a purely technical standpoint, you violated no temporal regulations because your actions were the regulations incarnate. She paused, and her stern expression softened fractionally. However, from a procedural standpoint, you made decisions without consultation, without authorization, and without the temporal expertise necessary to properly assess the consequences. You got lucky, Captain. The universe conspired to make your violation acceptable. But luck is not a sustainable command strategy. I agree completely, Picard said. Garrett blinked, clearly not expecting that response. You do. Yes, Captain. I got lucky. The Temporal Causality Station could just as easily have judged my intervention catastrophic and initiated timeline correction protocols. My crew and I could have been erased from existence, along with everything we'd done. I made a choice with incomplete information and hoped for the best. That's not good command practice, and I won't pretend otherwise. Then what will you pretend, Captain? Nakamura asked, his tone sharpening. Because I need to know. If you face another temporal incident, another impossible choice, will you violate the Temporal Prime Directive again? Picard held his admiral's gaze. If I encounter a true extinction-level event where I have the capability to intervene, and where non-intervention guarantees the death of billions of sentient beings, then yes, Admiral, I will violate the Temporal Prime Directive again. I will do so understanding the risks, accepting the consequences, and prepared to defend my choice to this commission or any other authority. Because some principles, the preservation of sentient life foremost among them, supersede regulations. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Picard knew he was effectively inviting his own court-martial, but he would not lie. Would not equivocate. Would not pretend he'd learned to always follow orders regardless of the moral cost. Admiral Nakamura stood, and Picard tensed, preparing for the order to surrender his command. Instead, Nakamura extended his hand. Captain Picard, after extensive review, the Temporal Integrity Commission and Starfleet Command have determined that no disciplinary action will be taken regarding the incident at Earth in 1996. Your actions, while technically in violation of standard temporal protocols, were validated by the highest temporal authority we recognize. You and your crew are cleared of all potential charges. Picard stood slowly, shaking the Admiral's hand while trying to process what he'd just heard. Sir, thank you. Don't thank me yet, Nakamura said with a slight smile. This entire incident is being classified at Level 1, highest possible security. You and your crew will never speak of it to anyone without proper clearance. Your official logs will reflect only a minor temporal anomaly that was successfully navigated. And Captain, his expression hardened. If you ever pull something like this again, the Temporal Causality Station might not be there to save you. Understood? Perfectly, Admiral. Good. Then get back to your ship, Captain. The Enterprise has a mission to complete. Back aboard the Enterprise, Picard stood in his ready room, looking at the stars and thinking about the impossible mission that officially never happened. Earth was saved. The timeline was intact. 2 crew members were dead, but 6 billion lives had been preserved. The moral calculus was favorable, and yet he still felt the weight of those 2 deaths like stones in his chest. The door chimed. Come. His senior staff entered, all of them, including LaForge and Crusher who hadn't attended the debriefing. They stood before his desk with expressions of barely contained curiosity. Well? Riker asked. What's the verdict? No court-martial, Picard said simply. No disciplinary action. The matter is classified and closed. The relief in the room was palpable. Crusher actually laughed, and even Worf allowed himself a slight smile. So we saved the world and got away with it, LaForge said. I have to admit, Captain, I wasn't sure that was possible. We didn't get away with anything, Mr. LaForge, Picard corrected gently. We did what was necessary, and the timeline confirmed it was correct. But 2 of our crew died in the process. That's not getting away with it. That's paying the price for our choices. The room sobered. They all remembered Lieutenant Chen and Ensign Markowitz. But they didn't die for nothing, Crusher said softly. They died saving Earth. Saving all of us, really, since we only exist because Earth survived long enough to create the Federation. Indeed, Picard agreed. And that's what I want you all to remember about this experience. Not the victory, not the regulations we violated, not even the temporal mechanics that made it all work. Remember that 2 good officers gave their lives so that billions could continue theirs. Remember that command sometimes requires impossible choices. And remember that the principles we serve, the preservation of life, the pursuit of knowledge, the defense of the innocent, are worth upholding even when regulations say we shouldn't. He looked around at his crew, at the faces of people he trusted with his life. What we did will never be publicly acknowledged. History won't record the Enterprise D's intervention at Earth in 1996. But we'll know. And that knowledge should inform how we approach every mission going forward. We are not just explorers. We are not just scientists. We are defenders of life in all its forms, regardless of which century that life exists in. That's a dangerous philosophy, Captain, Data observed. It suggests that Starfleet officers should prioritize saving lives over following regulations. Only in the most extreme circumstances, Mr. Data. And only when the officer involved is prepared to accept full responsibility for their choice. Picard stood, moving to the window where Earth's sun, the sun of his ancestors, shone in the distance. I don't want any of you to think that what we did sets a precedent. Each situation must be evaluated on its own merits. But I also don't want you to think that regulations are more important than the lives they were designed to protect. Use your judgment. Trust your principles. And if you must choose between following orders and doing what's right, be prepared to defend that choice afterward. Live long and prosper, Troy said softly, echoing the Vulcan blessing Picard had used in his broadcast to Earth. Indeed, Counselor. Picard turned back to his crew. Now, I believe we have a mission to complete. Mr. Data, what's our next assignment? Data pulled up the information on a PADD. We are to proceed to the Argolis cluster for long-range stellar mapping. Estimated duration, 3 weeks. No inhabited systems, no temporal anomalies detected. Good, Picard said with feeling. A nice, quiet, regulation-following mission is exactly what we need right now. His crew filed out, returning to their duties. Picard was about to sit down when his combadge chirped. Engineering to Captain Picard. Go ahead, Mr. LaForge. Captain, we've completed final diagnostics on the warp core. All traces of chronometric radiation have been eliminated. We're ready to resume standard operations. Excellent work, Commander. Bridge out. Picard stood at his window, watching the stars, thinking about time and choice and consequence. Somewhere in those stars, 374 years ago, Earth was rebuilding. The Watchers were forming. Humanity was beginning its long journey toward the moment when Zephram Cochrane would break the warp barrier and prove to the universe that Earth was ready to join the greater community of sentient species. All because the Enterprise D had been there when they were needed most. All because Jean-Luc Picard had chosen to violate the Temporal Prime Directive rather than watch billions die. All because sometimes, the right thing and the legal thing weren't the same thing, and a captain had to be brave enough to know the difference. Picard returned to his desk and began reviewing the mission parameters for the Argolis cluster survey. The work of exploration continued. The Enterprise would map new stars, discover new phenomena, and push the boundaries of human knowledge ever outward. But they would do so carrying the secret knowledge that they had saved the world that made it all possible. And that was enough.